Hello and welcome to Money Lap. I'm Parker Kligerman and joined as always by Landon Cassill. This is our podcast about all motorsports, but we're doing it live. Now, normally I'd have a big intro here and a bunch of jokes, or at least a couple of jokes I think are funny, but we have such a big show, we're just going to jump right into it. This is Money Lap Live. I'm here in Stamford, Connecticut at our Money Lap studio. Landon Cassill is at Cassill's Couch in Iowa. Landon, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I know you guys missed this beautiful backdrop last week, and maybe we'll get some hand gestures and balloons that whatever my MacBook does that we don't know how to control. We'll get some of that at some point today.
That'd be lovely. That thing does add a lot to it. People love those. It didn't work that time. We're going to jump right into it. As I mentioned, it's a huge show, and our first guest is on tap. He's a team owner, a series owner, a defunct track explorer, a broadcaster, podcaster, host of the Dale Jr. Download. He would absolutely win the most popular driver in Xfinity if he was eligible. You guessed it. It's Earnhardt Jr. on the Money Lap Live right here to announce, or to talk about at least. Dale, thank you for coming on. A big deal that you guys announced this week with the Cars Tour. You have a sponsor, brand new one, ZMAX.
Yeah, we do. We're pretty excited about being able to partner up with ZMAX, and this is our first year, we're ending our first year as series owners, and it's been a great experience. And so there's just a lot that we're excited to share about the series. ZMAX is coming on board as the title sponsor, and that brand is a great fit for us as a automotive motorsport sort of connection there. So it'll be a good fit, easy for our drivers and ourselves to talk about, and and hopefully we can, hopefully this is a long partnership in terms of a title sponsor. That's one of the biggest parts of the puzzle when you're trying to run either. It's like a primary sponsor on a race car. Without that, it's very, very difficult to be able to move forward. So that's a really important part of the puzzle that we're excited to announce. We are going to continue our streaming partnership with Flow. That's really been positive for us. And I was happy, but not entirely satisfied with our numbers. They're good numbers, but I feel like our growth and potential is way bigger. And so I have these higher goals for us in terms of our streaming numbers, but very good out of the gate for our first year. Way more people saw us this year than in years past. So that was great. And, we have the schedule finally released. It's funny when you're trying to put together a schedule. This was a great example of one of the things I learned as a series owner, or just being able to look behind the curtain of what it's like to run a series. So we race a late model stock car, which is, we kind of have a monopoly on that type of race car right here in the Southeast, in the mid-Atlantic part of our country, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, where the pros car and the super late model races all over the country. So the late model stock's really right here where we are, and we wouldn't be able to take our show up north or out west. There's nobody out there with those type of race cars. Our guys aren't going to travel 10, 14, 15 hours to go race somewhere. So we have this cool little package, and geographically we're in this very unique and specific location. And so even with that all said, it sounds like putting a schedule together would be very easy. But all of these racetracks, their health and survival is critical as well. They have their own races that are non-Cars Tour events, and they have other series like the pros or the supers that want to come to those racetracks modified. There's multiple modified series that operate in this area. So we have to find where our races can fit, where it works for the track, where it also works for other series. So you communicate a lot with other series owners, and our drivers, our team owners, they're like, we want the schedule now. Where's the schedule? When can we learn the schedule? And we're like, man, this is not easy putting this thing together. And, everybody wants the schedule before the end of the year so they can start planning and putting sponsorships together and so forth, all the various reasons. But it's not an easy thing, and it takes a while to put together. But that's just a small example of all of the crazy, minute, critical parts that it takes to get the series up and down the road. And in the off season, we're kind of like, going over rules and what might need to be updated or changed. And there's an announcement this weekend with Hoosier, how they're sort of changing their direction a little bit in short track and grassroots racing that will affect our drivers and teams and all the tracks that we compete at. And so there's just a lot happening. So it's been a fun year, a learning year. We're grateful for the ZMAX partnership and our relationship with Flo, and trying to move onward, man. It's a blast. I'm doing all that while I'm trying to also continue to be a team owner. That's a fine line to walk, right? I've owned a car that run in the series for over a decade with Josh Berry and Carson Quapple and other drivers. And so also I race myself a time or two in the Cars Tour. So it's kind of a weird dynamic. And I, have to be careful to make sure none of that affects the integrity of anything, right? The integrity of the series is important. And so we are very careful to protect that.
Well, I've kind of got two questions for you. One of them just about the appeal to be a car owner in the series. You had actually texted Parker and I a couple weeks ago and was like, "Hey, you guys should take a look at this." And we definitely appreciate that, because it is definitely something worth looking at to be an owner in the series. So I want to hear more about that from you, and why you think, what you think sets the Cars Tour apart, or what you're trying to accomplish for prospective drivers, family owned teams or professional team owners to build a team there. And then also I want to hear your thoughts on being a sanctioning body, because this is more than being a promoter, right? This is more than just promoting an event. You're an actual sanctioning body here, and you're part of the motorsports pipeline in America. And I kind of want to hear your thoughts on that, because we have spent our entire careers on the other end of that as drivers and even team owners. You're always kind of on the other side of the sanctioning body, right? And we always talk about NASCAR as them, but now that you are part of Cars Tour and own Cars Tour, you are them. So I want to hear about both of those things.
Sure. Being an owner in the series, in my opinion, obviously to go super late model racing, which is very, very popular across the entire country. And they got the Snowball Derby going on down in Florida, and on Racing America to be streamed live this weekend, which everybody that is a grassroots racer or loves that type of racing will be tuning into that event. Those cars, while incredibly entertaining, they cost more money to race, just like a truck or an Xfinity car. As you go up, right, the ladder, things get tougher financially. I feel like that the late model stock car is sort of in this nice little sweet spot where you can race something that's very, very similar to an Xfinity car or a truck chassis at a reasonable cost. And the sponsorship and the ability to put together packages is still attainable for a lot of people. And so it's not out of reach where, to race, above, I believe that type of a chassis, that type of a race car, the specific vehicle, it just, the numbers start to climb in terms of the expense that you're going to have to incur to race. So I think that with that said, you can go to race in the Cars Tour, learn the same racecraft, if not, you'll have the same opportunity to learn the same racecraft that will be necessary to be successful at the truck or Xfinity level. You can jump right out of the Cars Tour into a truck, into an Xfinity car, and be ready for that moment. And so to be able to gain the experience and and the understanding of how to compete in a symmetrical chassis, I feel like we're a great spot. And you have myself, Jeff Burton, Kevin Harvick, Justin Marks, and a lot of the industry paying attention, right? If you're going to try to get a driver some interest in the truck series or from truck owners or Xfinity owners, we want you to feel like the Cars Tour is a great place to get that opportunity, right? To be able to, get noticed. And so that's what we're trying to create without changing the financial structure of what competing costs. And so, that's difficult, and I'm learning that. I'm an owner in the series, so I think it gives me a great perspective of, all right, I know what it costs for my team to race. I can go to other owners and get pretty good numbers on what it's costing them to compete. And then I can also understand where I, as an owner, would love to shed cost. And I can take that put on my series owner hat and start to figure out how to make that a possibility. And, so that I think that, we have manufacturers that spend money in the Cars Tour, Chevrolet, Toyota. They have teams that compete in the Cars Tour. So there are cars out there for these young drivers that they believe in to race in. I believe that I want one day for there to be a Trackhouse late model stock car, or we have the Junior Motorsports late model stock car. I want there to be, other teams in the truck Xfinity level that also put late model stock cars out on the racetrack in the Cars Tour. And so, that would be a nice thing going down the road. To me, car count is important. Going to the racetrack, having 30, 40 cars trying to compete in our events is where we want to be. Those are pretty much close to what numbers we had last year. And so I was looking at you guys. I'm like, man, y'all love to drive. Y'all love to race. I know you'd love to be on the racetrack any opportunity you get. And I feel like that, you both individually have connections and you're smart in terms of being able to operate a race team. And so I feel like that, that would be a fun challenge for y'all to chase the opportunity to race at that level without having to, find the type of money that it would take to compete at a super late model or a truck or Xfinity level that you guys already know so well. And so you would have the same experience as an owner or driver, what have you, in our series without, having to, find that additional funding. But, and maybe that's what happens down the road. But, as a series owner or being part of the ownership group, it's just given me a lot of appreciation for NASCAR. Landon, you mentioned we've always kind of been in the car going, oh, NASCAR's this, NASCAR's that. I wish it was like this. Yeah. I wish it was. We always had that driver mentality. I learned and altered my opinions so much when I got into the broadcast booth. That continued when I became a series owner. It's at a much smaller scale, but I still can appreciate how NASCAR gets put in these situations where they can't win, but they have to make a decision. And either decision is going to bring scrutiny. But they're doing this on a national stage, right? And so every week they're put in a position to have to make a call they don't even want to make. And they're going to get criticized no matter what decision they make. That's something that I now appreciate that I didn't before. And the other thing too is, there's some pressure to succeed. There's pressure not to fail with our series. I could not imagine the pressure that NASCAR feels to succeed when they look at viewership, attendance at racetracks, when that's going up, when it's going down, how that might, affect the morale and tension within the industry, especially at the executive level. I do not envy that position that they're in. We're in the, we're down here in the grassroots level having a blast, We don't have those type of pressure that they have at the national level, at the global level, really. And they're competing neck and neck with IndyCar and F1 and all those other global brands, right? And it's such a tough scenario for them to be in.
Man, I hear that for sure, and I think you said that really well in terms of just how much they're dealing with and how you're seeing that, at least in a smaller level. I will say, in terms of us running a team, we have run an eNASCAR team successfully, but I believe the cost of wrecking will definitely be higher than eNASCAR. I can basically say that 100% fact. But I'm quickly, first of all, I don't know how you do it, man, with all you have going on. It's so cool that you, Kevin, Jeff Burton, Justin Marks have decided to give back the sport in this way and to support a series like this. You kind of alluded to it, but where do you see the Cars Tour in 5 years? What is a dream scenario? You kind of said maybe more people watching. You want the Cup teams or more teams involved on the NASCAR level. But like, what is Dale Jr. wakes up in 5 years and it's like, wow, this is where the Cars Tour is at. What's some metrics or some things you'd want to see that out of this series?
Yeah, I think that I would love to see the car count consistently at the around the 38 to 42 number. We're not far from that, but that would mean, you know, some and you know, the commitment from some of the, you know, some of the truck series teams and some of the Xfinity series teams, for them to find value in competing in that series and having a place for their younger drivers to cultivate their racecraft. I think is there's opportunity there for some of these teams to, and it's additional exposure for some of their partners. Maybe they've got a partner that can't be a primary on a truck or an Xfinity car, has that, doesn't have that kind of a spin to make in their marketing department, but they want to be an associate on a truck or an Xfinity car, and then this late model stock car could continue to give them more exposure in our series specifically. So that would be nice, to see some of them teams. And there has been, outside of Junior Motorsports, there has been other Xfinity teams that have brought race cars to the racetrack and competed. And so, that's, I think we're starting to see, some of that actually become reality. So in 5 years, it'd be nice to have the car counts continue to increase. Obviously, I mentioned viewership. The numbers are great, but, I feel like there are a lot of people that would love to watch our races that just either don't understand how simple the access is and just haven't been introduced to us yet. And so I think that there's totally, thousands and thousands of people out there that would become regular watchers of our races once they, either discover us or find that access. And the reason, why I love Flow is because, and we talked about this was very critical for me, at least, when we were negotiating with him, was we did not want the Cars Tour to be a new expense. Like, if you're a subscriber on Flow already, we didn't want you to have to spend another $20 to get the Cars Tour access. We were going to do a deal with a streamer. We wanted to be part of the subscription. If you're a subscriber, you get us, right? Yeah. And so it's a turnoff for me when I'm a subscriber to a streaming service and then there's an event that I have to then pay additional money for. I would rather, I understand why. I know that things cost money. I mean, you guys and we have our own shows. They don't, they cost money to make, and having good quality, editing and production is important. So I know those things cost money, but I just put it on the front end of the subscription. I'll buy it. Tell me what a full subscription costs to have access to everything. Maybe I will pay for that, right? A one lump sum. And so that's kind of where I enjoy, why I enjoy Flow, just as a personal preference. Maybe it doesn't matter to other people, but, I feel like too with Flow, they have racing, but everything else, like everything. I had no clue how much they have on their platform outside of motorsports, high school and college, all types of events happening every single day in any type of sports you could think of. And so the cost for the subscription to be able to access just about everything out there is pretty good. So I think it's a good value. But so I think I'll say this too. So those two things right there are probably the key for me. When I raced in the Cars Tour as an owner up until the last couple of years, when you're at the series owner at the racetrack at the event, you're looking in the grandstands and you're going, man, it's a good night. We got a lot of people. Or, man, it's a little thin, not a great night. What can we do with this event to make it better? You're only worrying about what is happening on the property. You don't think about the streaming audience because it was relatively small in terms of just running the business and how important it was for the series to succeed year round. We're having to shift that mentality inside our organization, inside the Cars Tour. We're having to sort of help people understand, like, I know that you want to make sure drivers' intros are robust and in person they're a great experience. And I know that you want to go through all the pre-race ceremonies, and there may be some people there that need to be acknowledged. And so all that stuff is very critical at track, but we have to start on time. We're a TV show now. We're a streaming show that we advertised a 8 p.m. start date. We cannot start at 9:30. We cannot go green at 10 o'clock, and so that was one thing that we worked really hard on this year, is just trying, and it's not so much our own people, it's getting the tracks there too. The tracks don't care. They're making their money on the gate and all that. They don't care when this race starts. They've got the people are there, right? They've got them in the building. And so trying to get the tracks to help us move the process along. They'll have their own support series there, bandoleros, street stocks, whatever, and they want to get those guys their race in, and they'll crash and their races run long. And next thing you know, our 8 o'clock start's not happening, and we're delayed till 9. And people on Flow have no idea. Our subscribers are tuned in, and all they see is a splash page with Flow Racing on it, and this event hasn't started yet, and there's no reason why. You don't know if it's raining or what. And so, there's just a lot of things like that we got to work on and improve. And we've gotten a lot better, and we want to continue, because, like I say, that the streaming partnership is as important as the title sponsor. I mean, there's two or three cornerstone things that have to be there for this series to live. And that's our title sponsor, and our streaming partners part of that too. And people, the numbers that I want to see on our streaming platform will only get to where I believe they can go if we say, hey man, tune in at 8 and the show starts. That's what you get, right? You want to have that consistency every single week.
Well, you are so right in that. We're all blazing a new trail, because getting to see this grassroots level of racing or anything, I'm sure that there's other sports that are going through the same thing, live is a very new thing. The ability to film and stream something on the internet was just not accessible. It was only reserved for, major broadcast partnered sports franchises and entertainment avenues. So we are blazing a new trail, and we talk about this every single year around the Chili Bowl, right? Because God bless the Chili Bowl, and we love the Chili Bowl, but I ain't staying up for that race. Like, I'll watch the F mains and the D mains, but I'm usually asleep by the time the A main even comes around, right? And
right, yeah.
And it's it's an incredible event, but they've from a fan's perspective that's maybe not fully committed to dirt racing, right? I love the Chili Bowl because I'm a race fan, but I don't bleed dirt racing. I'm asleep by 11 o'clock. I'm not watching that race, and if they want to capture me as an audience at scale, and really elevate that event to where it should and could be, race has got to start on time.
I'll give you this this is a very small sort of you know, how to get from A to B to C to D for people that are watching. So if you're a series owner, right, and what do you think would make your drivers and team owners really happy? That would be raising the purse, right? Every year, getting the purse raised
Yep.
up, filling the back end of the purse, whatever, right? Making it more money to start. And you want, as a series owner, man, you want to do that. You want to give that to them. You want to show them that you're doing good work. And the only way to do that, though, is to get more money in the actual account, right? The bank account, right? The only way to be able to give the drivers and teams that bump is to increase, revenue. And so the only way to increase revenue is to get better numbers on your streaming platform. And so the only way to get better numbers on your stream platform is to put a better stream online and more accessible and easier to watch. And so, it's very, very easy to understand in those terms, but it's like you say, it's very new, right? Shoot, 5 years ago, we couldn't watch a Saturday night show on a streaming platform, and there were just a couple that were popping up, and they were really, really rough, and we loved it. We didn't care because it was like, wow, I can watch a race at Langley Speedway. I don't care if there's not even an announcer. I'm just able to see the cars racing. I can tell who's winning.
Right.
Now it's evolving so quickly into every racetrack is now trying to make themselves available to streaming in some platform, and so we get spoiled, man. We get spoiled so easily because things are becoming so easily accessible.
Yeah. They'll get there, and I'm excited for it. Obviously because these big races, they've already sold out all the tickets, so we can't double the ticket prices, and then you jack up prices to where people can't even afford to come to the events. To scale these events, we just got to get more eyeballs, and they got to deliver it on time in a quality manner and have a good production quality. And so it's good to see, your involvement is gonna improve and drive that forward in a major way. I want to change subjects really quick before we let you go, and then we have a question of the day that we try to ask all of our guests. So the age-old conversation with NASCAR in particular and racing in general is, horsepower, downforce, tires, all this stuff, right? You've driven a lot of different race cars. You've owned different race cars. Now you're super involved in the Cars Tour, so you're really thinking about late model packages and rules packages. And then, and you're still in the broadcast booth, so you're really in tune with what's going on in NASCAR. Dale Jr., what is your ideal race car? What is the race car that you think we all should be racing?
Dream one.
At the Cup level?
I think anywhere. You're just dream car. It doesn't have to be. Don't doesn't need to be Cars Tour, NASCAR. You just woke up one day and you're like, this would be the coolest car for Dale Jr.
Man, I mean, that's tough. I am really partial to the late model stock car that we race in the Cars Tour. I grew up racing that car in the 90s, and a version of that chassis, which is basically a Cup Busch truck chassis from probably 15 years ago. It still has a manual old school steering box with a drag link, or quick change rear end. It's very easy to work on. So easy to work on. And easy to fix. The bodies and all that stuff are pretty much, self-explanatory in terms of, like, you call 5-star to get you half a nose if you tore the right side off of it. I just love everything about them. They look cool. And they're relatively, affordable for a hardcore serious racer. And so I think that is a good kind of a nucleus, a starting point. I also love the bias ply tire. And maybe, if you put this type of tire on an Xfinity car, maybe I'd love the Xfinity car more. I don't know. The radial tire for me is kind of a tough deal. I mean, it's they are what they are. But the bias ply, you can really, drive the car harder and move the car around, and there's a lot of sliding and movement in the car, and there's a lot of forgiveness. But you can be penalty. There's a penalty to beating up the tire or being hard on it, and so I kind of think the tire is important. You guys would agree the tire is one of the most critical components because it locks the car to the ground. And even the greatest race car with a bad tire is not a great car, not a fun car to drive. And so, I think, when you look at our late model stock car that you just threw up on the screen, if you peeled the body off of that thing, it would look very, very similar to the NASCAR stock cars that we raced from the 80s, 90s up into the early 2000s. And the chassis is not much different at all. And there are coilover springs, and I'm not particular toward coilovers or big springs. I do like the trailing arm rear suspension over the 3-link. I think the 3-link is there's nothing against 3-links. They're just very complicated, and it can get expensive, I guess, when you think about 3 and 4 links. But there's just the truck arms just so simple. Hey, bolt them onto the cross member. They have to be this length. It's easy to police and I kind of like cars like that. I like cars that are very basic, stripped down, simple rules, easy to work on, easy to repair. I don't have a preference on power. I know there's this crazy, passionate debate about, horsepower. I would give the drivers what they're asking for at the cup level. They're asking for it, and give it to them. But in terms of what I think, I want more power in my late model stock car? No. I don't. I think we have a hard time locking it down as it is. Hell, we're taking gear out. We're running crate engines that are way down on power just to be better at lap 100. We don't even need all the power that we can make. And so, for our little series, I think we're in a really, really, really good space. And honestly, that's why I still drive them. I really enjoy driving that particular race car. But so that might help you. It doesn't really answer the question specifically, but the late model stock car is a great starting point for me because of I feel very, very comfortable working on it and fixing it and getting it ready for the race.
What I heard is a car that's forgiving to drive, which I think that's it sounds like a soft thing to say, but I think that's a legitimate thing to consider about stock car racing. Is a car that you can lean into, and it helps you lean into other cars. It helps you lean into the racetrack. It helps with close quarter racing. And if you think of the scale of tire forgiveness, you have bias ply tires over here and radial tires over here. And in the cup level, we've gone beyond radial tires, and now we have a really low profile tire, right? And honestly, we see we see it's really hard to lean into the racetrack, to lean into other cars. I mean, still the racing is good and is exciting. The cars perform well, and they get into each other, and the passing and the aero is not horrible in the cup level. We should put on some good racing, but there's something missing, right? And there's that that character of the car, like that feel of sliding your car, and that the workability of it is kind of missing right now in those cars.
I am entertained as I can be at a mile and a half, and even at the super speedways to a point. The super speedway racing, there's not like a perfect gen, NASCAR that, this was the best car for super speedway racing. But I really enjoy the next gen car at a lot of the racetracks we go to. I do not enjoy it at the short tracks or the road courses. It's missing. It's missing something. It has something that it doesn't need. I don't know what the answer is. I am thankful that NASCAR is working very hard to find it. I think that they made some great gains with the tire itself, especially at the Martinsville race. And so, I mean, there's a good effort to improve it. And, so I agree with you. I mean, the short sidewall tire, I would not want that. I wouldn't prefer that. Just my personal opinion. If I was going to create a race car and put it on a racetrack, I would not get for ovals, I would not have a short profile tire. I just think the bias ply or the taller sidewall just gives the driver a lot more feedback and understand what the car is really kind of doing and how much he's got to really push the car. So, but to your point, I've seen that short sidewall next gen car do things this year that I didn't think it was really capable of doing, in terms of drivers being able to lean on each other, drivers having a bit bigger of a window to understand where the slip in the tire was at, and actually being able to save the car and drive it out of some moments that would have probably been bad crashes in that first 12 months of the next gen era. So they're gaining on it. The teams oddly and incredibly find a way to make that box bigger, that box of forgiveness that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
What I love, first of all, thank you for the time, man. I probably owe you a sun drop. I'll get you one after this.
No,
for
I'm good,
sticking
man.
around so
I'm
long.
watching. Hey, I've been watching y'all, man. I think the world of both of y'all, and I've been seeing what y'all been doing, and I love y'all's work. I love your work ethic, man. You guys are go-getters, and it's fun to watch somebody lap and see you guys getting creative with it. And y'all are two good dudes, and I love y'all's friendship, and it's fun to watch.
Man, I might tear up. Thank you so much. But just real quick, we're going to let you go right after this. Just question of the day. You talked about cars and everything. What I love about the Cars Tour and the car you mentioned there, late model stock, is simplicity. You're definitely a purist. But we were having this discussion throughout this show, and that is going to be the ideal schedule length. You guys have 19 races in the Cars Tour. We have 38 in the NASCAR Cup Series. When you think about Dale, the driver, or a fan, you sit there and you say, what's the ideal amount of races in a series? F1's going to a bunch more, they're going to hit their limit in races at basically 24. What's the ideal number of races for Dale Jr.?
Yeah, I think 28 races, maybe 30 max. I believe that, the teams and the industry needs breaks. They need weeks off. They need time at home. They need holidays. They need a couple weekends in the summer to go to the beach. And there was a moment probably back in the early 80s and late 70s when we had about a 28 race schedule. The sport was popular, growing. It succeeded with that amount of races. And so I think that would be a good number to get close to be able to give the industry. So I worry about the burnout of our mechanics, engineers, crew chiefs, the drivers. There may be some concern about burnout, but not so much. But these the workhorses that are getting these cars to the racetrack and through the race weekend are the ones that we'll hear about people like, yep, Bobby ain't coming back. He's going back to the family business up north. And you're like, he's leaving the sport entirely? I would never imagine somebody doing that, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. Like, we all were dying to get into this sport. Now people are just walking away like, I've had enough. And so I think it's the schedule. It's the week daily grind for the mechanics and the PR people and all the industry folks. That it's a big traveling circus, right? And it's never rooted anywhere, and it never takes any time off. You're moving all the time. And so, that's kind of the reason why I think cutting back, but it's one of those things, we think we can say that's a great idea, but you can never put the toothpaste back in the tube. Things would have to be, something drastic would really have to happen for NASCAR to ever want to cut back on races. And so I don't know what that would be. I mean, the pandemic didn't do it. And the pandemic changed everything about the sport. So
well, it's hard because it's hard to talk about trying to cut back races when we get paid to race by the race that we race. So there's a bit of a conundrum. I'm not trying to oversimplify it, right? But
drivers, if they had the week off, they'd go race somewhere else, right? Carl Larson would go run a dirt track somewhere. So drivers would still drive, but our mechanics, I'm sitting in looking out the window of the studio at Dirty Mo Media in the shop now, and I know there's some people that would love another weekend or two off, even into Xfinity level, which has some off weekends in it. So we see it in their faces, right? When we have our meetings at the shop, they are run into the ground in those last 10 weeks of the year. It's all they can do to keep pushing forward.
Really well said, man. So awesome chatting with you. Thank you so much. Congratulations on all the success with the Cars Tour. Enjoy your off time, my man. Thanks so much for coming on Money Lap.
Hope y'all had a great Thanksgiving. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Appreciate it,
Thanks,
buddy.
Dale.
See you later. He's the man.
He is. He's the best.
I
always appreciate.
Well, hold on. I just want to put it out there that
go ahead.
We sold him on maybe a 10-minute discussion on the Cars Tour. We went about 40 minutes.
Well, first of all, maybe we need to have a post-production meeting here because you keep telling our guests that we only need them for 10 to 15 minutes. It's a 3-hour show, Parker. We're live for 3 hours. So when we got a lot to go through to get guests on the show, and then you tell them we only need them for 10 minutes, I'm like, no, we're gonna get him. We're gonna get him here and throw the keys on the roof.
Yeah, that's true. You know what? That we'll start working on just trying to lock them in for a whole hour each time. I think there's a lot to unpack there with everything he dived into. First of all, so cool to learn the insights of the Cars Tour, what's happening there. He's your thoughts on the ideal race car. I just love that. Like, to me, he's such a purist, right? And a bias plied late model stock car, is the purest form of stock car racing probably out there, right? That's what he started in, and majority of so many drivers that get to the NASCAR level started in or drove a car like that. And, there's a purity in that. And unlike Formula One or sports car racing, stock car racing, maybe in the last decade or 2 decades, kind of hit a plateau of aligning with modern technology, right? And maybe there's something to be said for what he's talking about in terms of like, hey, maybe that's just what it should have been, it should be. Not aligning with Formula One's idea of being super high tech or sports car racing, which is, it's an interesting thought. I just think, I was sitting here and I'm like, that's a possible ideology that stock car racing has that maybe, why the Xfinity series is so popular. We said it's NASCAR racing that if you liked it over the last 2 decades, this is the product, right? Maybe there's something to be said for that in that discussion.
2 things to go off of that. So first of all, and one I'll say is a more positive note, it's something we've brought up in the past, which is NASCAR needs its established grassroots pipeline. We need a bread and butter pipeline for our drivers, our teams, our people, our mechanics, our team owners, sponsors. There's no better place to have an endemic pipeline than in the Southeast, than in stock car racing. Dirt racing is great. We get a lot of talent that comes from dirt racing, but it is also a niche of its own, right? So there's a lot of, mechanics and team owners that come up through dirt racing, then they never leave dirt racing. They don't make it over, or they don't make a transition over to NASCAR racing. The drivers do a lot. And they'll bring their sponsors with them. And the manufacturers are obviously invested in dirt racing. But NASCAR itself, and I know the Cars Tour isn't a NASCAR property, but, a lot of the tracks they're racing at are NASCAR sanctioned tracks. I think the pipeline leads directly into NASCAR. And I think that's extremely important because we talked about that with some of the drivers that have come from other series and even other countries into NASCAR, which is a great thing. And I think it brings a lot of attention to the sport. But I do think that for the sake of NASCAR's endemic pipeline, the health of the sport needs the majority of our talent to come from, our own pipeline. So that's thought number one.
Yep.
The other thought there, and this is way bigger picture thinking here, maybe a little bordering on galaxy brain, but just bear with me.
Whoa.
One of Dale's real selling points to this series is how similar, first of all, the simplicity of the cars. I love it. He's right. I think no matter what type of car is racing at that level in a series, like whatever the Cars Tour looks like today or 20 years from now, the cars should be simple, right? And they should be easy to work on. They should be accessible. So I appreciate that is a guiding light for him. One of his appeals with the car is that it's very similar to a legacy NASCAR race car, right? He referenced multiple times it's similar to a truck chassis or a Busch car, an Xfinity chassis. Um, the thing to consider though is that that's going to change over the next decades, right? Cup cars are already a next gen chassis. I think that it's probably imminent that the Xfinity car, I don't know if it's in 2 years, 5 years, or 10 years, will probably evolve into some kind of next gen chassis, right? The truck series will
Yep.
probably follow suit at some point. And how does the Cars Tour or grassroots, short track racing, that again, going back to it needing to be our pipeline into NASCAR, how does a series like that going to need to evolve, right? If NASCAR late model stock racing was founded on, hey, we can build, we're building essentially the same car that you're going to race in NASCAR, does the Cars Tour have to adapt to that?
Yep. It's, I don't know, because I think there's, you keep the entry level simple, right? As he said, those cars are so simple. There's only so many things you can do them financially to go faster. Like that's the natural cap you need at the lower levels. If you look at go-kart racing right now, high level road course go-kart racing is out of control. If you go to the GoPro Motorplex for a national race, there's haulers bigger than Cup teams. They are large, hospitality larger than IndyCar teams. It's insane. People are spending six figures plus, multiple six figures in a season to go race at that level, and it's go-karts. And no offense to the go-kart world, because I love it and it's really cool and I enjoy it. But for the last 30 years, when you walk into there was a joke about go-kart racing, which was you would walk into the owner of a race car team and say, "Hey, I won 150 go-kart races." And they say, "Cool. How many car races have you won?" Like, it didn't matter. No one cared. They're entirely different. But I think it's an odd thing. You don't want that to happen at the grassroots level, because you want the ability to the ladder system you talked about, but you don't want the technology to get out of control that it becomes so expensive.
I kind of want to pause though, because I don't want to confuse Cars Tour needs to, adapt to next gen over time, right?
Okay.
In the next decade or however long it is. I don't want to confuse that with the cars becoming complex and losing the simplicity factor, because the next gen can be more simple, right? Let's just say that the Cars Tour next year was going to adapt a next gen chassis, right? And it was going to be hand-me-down Cup cars or whatever it was going to be. They can simplify those cars. They can. The next gen doesn't have to be as complex with all of the suspension points and all the different options it has. They can way simple. I mean, that's what a Cars Tour car is right now. It's a simplified version of a Busch car or a Cup car. They don't run a lot of the same things in those cars that that NASCAR stuff has had. Maybe it is a little bit closer to the simplicity, but a next gen car could be simplified for the Cars Tour. I guess my point is, like, at what point, if NASCAR continues to evolve this next gen chassis and next gen cars and bodies and tire and all that stuff, at what point is it too far of a departure from a grassroots car like the Cars Tour, where Cars Tour needs to keep up with that?
Yep. It's a good question. Something I should do here, because I've been a terrible host today, as we did such a fast entrance. Dale was waiting for us, and he was a very punctual guest, which was amazing. I should say we also have Jordan Taylor on this show, also known as Rodney Sandstorm. He and I did an interview yesterday that will play here probably in the next half hour, 45 minutes. If you're watching us live on YouTube, if you're listening on the podcast, as always, we'll do our best to describe some of the visuals that are happening here for the YouTube live version of this. We also have Adam Stern from the Sports Business Journal. If you look at the ticker below, or if you listen to the podcast today on Wednesday, November 29th, it's expected that NASCAR is going to announce at 5 p.m. their new TV deal. Well, ahead of that, we have Adam Stern coming on here to talk about it, what he expects to hear at 5 p.m. So that'll be pretty cool. And some of the other big topics in the business world behind motorsports. But Landon, if we want to switch, I hate this, switch gears. Should we say switch gears? Should we talk Formula One? and dive into
Yeah, let's
wrap
do
up
it.
the season a little bit. So we've got some really cool stuff. First and foremost, to wrap it up, if you've been living under a rock or need to know, Max Verstappen, of course, dominated the race. Ferrari got beat by Mercedes for P2 in the Constructors' Championship, which involves a lot of money. But I did do a lot of digging and found a lot of data and things for us to dive into from this season. And I was looking at some of the race pace stuff after the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, which I found fascinating. There's a lot of these apps that are able to take the telemetry information, the timing scoring, and then give you sort of a better breakdown, a lot of analytics. So one of the things I found was average race pace. Once again, Max Verstappen was the fastest in this, as you'd be surprised. He led by over his teammate Perez by a tenth and a half at Abu Dhabi. But you start to look at the gaps, and it's pretty amazing looking at some of the gaps as they go back in terms of how much faster those Red Bull cars were in the last race of the season. A car that Lewis Hamilton said they haven't been developing basically since June or July, continued to have half a second on most of the field. Just unbelievable domination.
Been 3 to 6 tenths all season long. We had this.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like we're just wrapping a bow on the conversation we had clear back before Monaco. That was like, wow, Red Bull has a half a second gap on the field. Will they close the gap? Fast forward to Abu Dhabi, end of the season. No, they didn't.
They really haven't. And it's just, you look at some of the gaps. I like looking at some of the other drivers versus their teammates in the field. One interesting one that's still an ongoing discussion right now is Logan Sargent versus Alex Albon in the Williams. And basically that they haven't announced that Logan has come back. They wanted to look at more data and see if he's improved. So I looked at this last race on average race pace. He was basically just over 2.5 tenths behind Alex Albon. So not terrible considering he started the back with traffic and that sort of thing. Not a huge margin. So I feel confident he might get a shot to be back in that Williams next year. For looking at some of the numbers, even at just this last race. I know they were going to look at the second half of the season, but that's not massive considering where he was in the field. I did also find fastest lap from this past weekend, and I found this one interesting in the race. Verstappen had it by a half second over Perez. But this is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, straightaway.
No, they weren't the fastest on the straightaway. The Williams were. So that's a lot of times downforce induced, timing of how they apply the energy system, right? So there's a couple things, and you can a lot of times mean like Williams obviously is not as fast in the corners because they have less. They're not making the same amount of downforce or drag that the Red Bull does. So that can be misleading at places like Abu Dhabi. So I thought those were fun, cool to dive in. As I said, I just wanted to wrap up Formula One for the year, basically, and some cool information out there since we talk about it each and every week here on the Money Lap podcast. For those just tuning in, if you're watching here on YouTube Live, we are summing up some of the biggest topics from the Formula One season 2023. In this section, we do have Jordan Taylor coming up here in just a little bit from an interview yesterday that I did with him, which was pretty awesome. And then, of course, Adam Stern joining us later on in the show. We have a driving thing now, Landon, we can jump into. Although that was racing, I guess, etiquette. There is a driving topic in Formula One that I thought was really interesting. Our buddy Blake Hensley had a tweet this week after the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix in something that I noticed onboards wise when the TV broadcast was on board with Charles Leclerc, and that was that he. Oh, do you need help over there? By the way.
No, I'm good. I'm good here.
You're good?
I'm good to the Jordan Taylor interview.
Okay,
yeah, I'm just keeping you posted.
Landon's dealing with a battery decreasing situation, so if he disappears, we'll go to the Jordan Taylor interview.
It's not a panic. I'm just keeping you posted.
Okay, thanks. So essentially, what Blake pointed out is something that I heard on the broadcast, and that is an odd throttle application from Charles Leclerc, especially in the lower speed corners. It's almost before the exit portion, or even, just sort of rushing the throttle on the exit. And so it's really interesting when you you break this down, because it reminded me right when I heard it of the turbo era in the 80s. And if you listen to some kart/champ car drivers through the 90s and into the 2000s a little bit, they had this throttle application. It was all about spooling the turbos, keeping the turbo spooled, keeping the RPMs up. And so maybe it's like a rush to throttle or a quick succession to throttle on the X of the corners. And so Blake pointed this out, that in the data, you could see Charles Leclerc doing this. Now, a modern Formula One car does not need to spool a turbo, right? That's being done by all the engine management software. You don't need to bump the RPMs. You're not trying to, boost the energy system. So really, the only thing we could boil it down to, he and I went back and forth on Twitter, was that this is essentially just a driving style. And this driving style, for people that think Formula One is in its own siloed world, and that all other motorsports are not similar, this is a very similar driving style to drivers like Tony Stewart. I got to see some of his data later on in his career, where he would have a throttle application that was sort of rapid on the exit of corners. Tyler Reddick right now has this sort of throttle application. Denny Hamlin at times had a bit of a throttle application that has a bit of a rapidness to it. So just interesting. And to think about Formula One being so technical, so much, so much data points to be able to decipher what a driver is doing or what the car wants, or the car deciding what it needs to do corner by corner. To see a little bit of human driving style in there, I think is really fascinating when you look at this data from the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix.
So to you, is this like, are you looking at the farthest left part of their throttle trace, and this is after they reach wide open, or is this around their initial throttle touch?
It's their initial throttle touch. I don't think producer Josh is doing a good job here of putting up the correct tweet.
No, that's fine. So what's happening at their initial throttle touch?
I'm doing my best over here, Parker. I'm sorry.
There's a term. I mean, I use a term for that. I don't know. It looks like they're testing the throttle, right? Like,
yes,
so
that's a great way to put it.
Instead of tipping into the throttle, right, with 0% to 5% to 10% to 20%, they're testing the throttle and just going right to 60 or 80%, and then backing off, and then 60 or 80% again, like almost treating the throttle pedal like it's a light switch. Right?
Little less that. It's a little bit more subtle. No, it's a little more subtle. So if you look at the bottom here on this picture, it's it's a 5 to 10%er, but it's rapid succession almost. It's almost like a maintenance throttle right at the center of the corner. And it's just, I don't know. If this is something, now remember, the definition of this telemetry is not, I believe, super high end, like the stuff you get from the F1 telemetry API isn't the frequency, whatever the term is, in terms of it being like, you've seen every little thing being done. It's a little dull, but you can see these movements in the bottom of the throttle trace, and you can hear it too. If you're on the onboard, you can hear it. It's like a or like a. So I don't know. It's got, the only thing I could think was that it was just a driving style thing, a little bit.
I think Landon has officially.
I think
is he still there?
We lost his charge. We've never had issues on the Money Lap. This is our third one, Money Lap Live. Yeah, well, your computer's decided you're turning out.
Nothing is happening because I got 4%.
You know what? We'll come back to this. Why don't we go to the Jordan Taylor interview, who joined us yesterday? He's an awesome dude who has such a cool diverse racing background, and also has an alter ego. Josh, play that. And now we welcome a driver who I ran into on a charge through the field in Portland. He's run late model races and driven for the godfather of NASCAR, Rick Hendrick. He's won the 24 Hours of Daytona, the 24 Hours of Le Mans, the 12 Hours of Sebring, and 4 IMSA championships. And he's done all of this while operating under an alter ego. It's none other than Jordan Rodney Sandstorm Taylor on the Money Lap Live. Welcome to the show, buddy. Thank you for coming on. Would be way cooler there with the clap. Yeah. How did I do? Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thanks for clapping with us. Yeah, we appreciate it. Yeah. We try to give each guest a real build up. And yours was easy because you've done a lot. Yeah. Really easy.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
So much. Yeah, and you've doing so much that we're actually recording this. You're our first ever Money Lap Live guest that we recorded. So you have that honor because you don't have much of an off season. You you switched from Corvette back to Acura, Wayne Taylor Racing, and from GT to GTP. You recently were at a test. You got a simulator and you got another test. What off season do you have? Is there one?
Yeah, I thought I was actually going to have an off season this year, but yeah, I've already been to Indy once for 3 days for a simulator test. Then we did a Sebring test, and yeah, now tomorrow morning I fly back to Indy for 2 days in the sim. Drive down to Bowling Green to do a shakedown of the 2 new cars, and then fly back to Florida to do our Daytona test, mid next week.
Wow.
So yeah, a lot going on, but there's a lot to learn with this new class. So I'm actually glad that I get the seat time to kind of get a better understanding of everything.
And I want to dive into that because I don't think people appreciate, who don't know what's going on in IMSA right now in the sports car world, how intricate these cars are. From what you came from the GT side, which is, molded towards this GT3 homologation throughout the world, to this GTP category, the top level of prototypes that's across, in WEC and at Le Mans and also here in IMSA. These cars are insanely intricate. Like this is the highest level of technology in sports car racing right now, and they're crazy.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I don't think I really respected it from the outside when I was in GT, like when this new class came in. And obviously my brother's been in the class for a year now, and he was telling me all these different systems. But yeah, the manual just to control the steering wheel was 30 pages long. And before the first test, trying to read through it and understand what it is and what it takes was just ridiculous. And then, I do my first run in the car. I did 2 runs in the car on day 1, and I honestly never even looked at the steering wheel because there was so much going on just from a driving point of view that I didn't have time to look down. And then, day 2, they're having me go through all these different changes of, brake balance, brake migration, differential changes, traction control changes, and then all sorts of different sensor resets. So there's just a million things going on. And then you have to drive the car on top of that. So it's good that we can, get these test days in real life. And then now that, we have the HPD simulator, we can practice those system changes in the sim as well. So it's a little bit more natural when we get to the racetrack.
And I'm curious about that because I feel like every time I've done the IMSA broadcasting stuff, I'm always asking these similar questions, but the technology is changing all the time. And for you're jumping from that GT car and GT category that went away from even, maybe a couple of years ago when it was GTLM, was closer to a prototype in a lot of ways, right? And what you had there for it's the GT3, which is ABS and traction control and just all these aids. What is that like? Let's dive into the driving. Normally I have Landon Cassill here who's going to dive into the driving even deeper, but tell me, is it your braking pressure that's changing and just the mentality that changes? How different is that?
Yeah, I mean, GTLM was an amazing class. That was for the NASCAR fans, GTLM was the premier GT class that we had worldwide. And it was an open tire. So, we would work with Michelin, with Corvette, and develop a tire just for our car. So it was an amazing tire. We'd do 3 hours on a set of tires at Le Mans, and your last lap of the last stint would be your fastest one. That's how good the tires were. So you develop this amazing car on this tire and all the technology. And then now it's been shifted to this GT3 spec, where the tire that we run now is more of a spec tire that kind of goes across all the car brands. So there's nothing too crazy about it. It's very durable. But you also have ABS now, which is a huge, asset to a driver just to kind of make the brake zones a little bit easier. But it kind of closes up the gap between all the drivers and the competition. So it makes it more difficult to pass, and, the guys are making less mistakes. So going back to GTP, you lose that, ABS feel. So now you've kind of got to brake with your foot again and have ABS in your foot not to cause lockups. And then, I think the driving style changes massively with that, because with the ABS, you can just kind of stand on the brake pedal as hard as you want, and the system's going to control everything for you. The GT car is also way softer. It's more, mechanically sound. It doesn't have as much downforce. Then you go back to the prototype and it's all aero. So all the springs are stiff. The roll bars are way stiffer. You're just trying to keep as stable as a platform as possible to kind of keep the floor very smooth, to keep the floor working just for all the downforce. So coming back to it, it felt like driving a massive go-kart again with a ridiculous amount of horsepower, especially around Sebring where it's bumpy. So it took a couple laps to get comfortable, but at the end of the day, it was just another race car. I learned how to drive a late model this year, a Cup car, an Xfinity car, and it was the same learning process. It's still got a steering wheel, pedals, and 4 tires. So you just kind of figure out how to drive it and what it likes.
And I want to dive into the NASCAR stuff for sure, obviously, because I think that was a really cool thing to see and the experience you had there. We'll get into it in a minute, but I just want to stick on this GTP stuff and the prototypes. And you mentioned, sort of the difference in the braking, that sort of thing. I know you're really fit. I think you just recently did an Ironman. But one of the things that stuck out to me jumping between different race cars is sometimes just the level of brake pressure required, or the amount, the force you're hitting that thing with, which I think is one of the more physical things. Add in downforce, which can make it a more physical race car. Is there big difference for you? Just, I know you say it's just a race car, but how different is that even just physically when you look at doing endurance races and your stints and that sort of thing from what you've been doing on the GT side?
Yeah, thankfully the brake pedal wasn't too heavy. That was a concern. The biggest thing for me was the G-forces. G-forces have gone way up for me from GT to prototype. I mean, a GT car makes good grip, but when you add in the downforce of a prototype, it's a different level. So, we did 2 days at Sebring like we've got here on video. It's got some high speed sections, but by the end of the test, my ribs, my back, my core, my neck, everything was sore. So I've got to get back to the gym, stop doing all my triathlon training, which is just, cardio, and start working on some muscles again that I haven't done any work. So yeah, I was shocked how much of that kind of muscle memory my body lost from back when I drove prototypes a few years ago, and kind of reminded me how physical these cars can be.
God, that's crazy, man. It's like go-karts. Like every time I've hopped in a go-kart after a couple years out, it beats the shit out of me. And I'm like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. It felt the same. I was sore for 2 days after.
And Sebring's brutal. I used to wear, I trusted some open wheel cars down there and I had to wear knee pads inside.
Because, an open wheel car around there is not fun. It's not designed for Sebring.
No, it's atrocious at this point. It's an awesome racetrack, but atrocious. Just talking about your teammates you're going to be with, Louis Delatraz would be your main teammate in the IMSA category. And then obviously it was announced for the Rolex, Colton Herta coming over. So I think that's one of the coolest things. You talk about all this stuff you've driven this year, but one of the things you guys experience a lot in endurance racing, especially like the Rolex 24, is these drivers from other categories coming in. Have you dealt much with Colton, talked to him much, that sort of thing, and just sort of how are you dealing with your teammate Louis?
Yeah, I mean, Louis is great. He was with the team, I think the last year and a half, probably as third driver. So he knows the car. He's won the ELMS championship like 3 or 4 times. He won the WEC championship last year. So super successful guy, super young. Like I always still feel like I'm still the young guy, but he's like 9 years younger than me. So he's making me feel old. Colton, I've known, a little bit for a few years, just through social media and saying hello at the racetrack. He seems like a great guy. He's won Daytona twice. So for us, it's about getting quick guys, obviously, but guys who obviously know endurance racing. And he's, been with BMW for years. He won, Daytona in an LMP2 car. And we also have Jensen Button coming on, who I worked with through the Garage 56 program. And just another amazing guy, amazing talent, obviously Formula One world champion, has got insane experience that he can kind of bring to the program. So yeah, that's the really cool thing about Daytona that, a lot of other sports and series don't get. We've had so many drivers coming from different disciplines, NASCAR, Formula One, IndyCar, every discipline comes to Daytona and tries to win. So as a driver like you always want to compare yourself to other guys in different sports. So there's no better comparison when they jump in the same car as you to kind of get a fair shot and fair see of what you're like compared to an IndyCar driver, a NASCAR driver, a Formula One driver. And I've been lucky enough to drive with guys like Kobayashi, Fernando Alonso, Jeff Gordon, Ryan Hunter-Reay, Formula One champions, Indy 500 champions, NASCAR champions. And it's so interesting to see, their background and how they approach a weekend and how they go about their racing. And you can learn a lot from those types of guys.
And you're probably the first driver they ever met that had an alter ego. That possibly were they more excited to meet Rodney or Jordan? Do you think when you met some?
Well, the whole Rodney thing was birthed on that Jeff Gordon weekend back in 2017 when he was my teammate. So if he wasn't my teammate, that whole thing never would have happened. But that was the funny thing when Alonso showed up. One of the first things he did, when he met me in person, was like he went down on one knee and was like, he's going to make a video about me. I guarantee it. So he knew kind of what he was coming into, and he was so fun. Like he gets a certain face on him, when he's competitive, but behind closed doors, he was always down for having some fun. He wore the Rodney jacket. He did some videos as Rodney himself. So yeah, that whole alter ego thing has definitely taken on a life of its own, which has been fun to kind of ride the wave of.
I got to interview Fernando on that rain out one, and walking down pit lane in an absolute monsoon, and he was so gracious with his time and actually kind of funny during it. And I remember thinking, well, that's the coolest guy I've ever met. There you go. No offense to you. I just thought he was pretty cool to be an F1 world champ and to just take that time in the midst of the rain. I'm curious though, you mentioned the Garage 56. So you've done all this cool stuff, but probably the coolest car of the last decade that showed up in motorsports. Just this thing, dude. I mean, for all of us in the NASCAR world, it was like, wow, I can't believe they're doing it. That's awesome. And I kept checking in with Chad Canals at times, being like, okay, what's the latest update? I got to see the engine you guys had back at ECR when they were first dynoing it, and just sort of see that thing come together. But I mean, being a part of that program, that had to be just like the wildest experience of all time.
Yeah, it was so cool. Like Chad was obviously involved with Jimmy's stuff on the sports car side when Jimmy was doing some IMSA races. So I kind of got to know them a little bit through that on the sports car side, and obviously knowing them through Jeff Gordon from the 2017 year. I was doing the same thing. I was, reaching out to Chad, every couple of months before kind of the car came to life, just to say like, hey, if you ever need help from a sports car side or a different perspective, I'd love to be involved. And once all the drivers were announced, I was like, all right, I guess that's that. And then I got a call to kind of help on the side as a coach, which was just a ridiculous title, but it was fun. And I was just so happy to be involved with the program with, legends of drivers that they had. And then to work with a team like Hendrick was incredible, just to see their work ethic. I went to the first test of Daytona with them, and, you're on calls before and after the test, reviewing everything, going over every lap that you did, if you ask for one change in the car on one day, it's in the car for the next day. So just the work ethic of all the different sides that were involved was just insane. And to see the progression from where it was at the first test to where it ended up being at Le Mans was just incredible to see the progression of the car. And yeah, like when it was back in those black colors, it looked super mean, and the car was so different to drive back then to when we got to Le Mans. So it was super cool. Obviously, we all spent so much time together through all those tests. We did like a couple Sebring tests. We did a 24-hour there. We did COTA, Daytona, and then Le Mans. So the buildup was insane. We knew how cool the car would be, but I don't think anyone could have anticipated how popular it would end up being.
No doubt. What's the part that like stuck out to you the most? What surprised you in that program and through that experience? When you think back, you're like, that was nuts. That's insane. How did that happen? Or how did we do that?
I mean, the race itself went super well. I think no one expected us to be like battling the GT cars or ahead of the GT cars for the majority of the race. So I think the speed of the car was super impressive, especially with the limitations that we had on the development side. We were only allowed to do certain things to kind of take it to a next level. So if they were kind of unleashed to, sorry, my arm keeps going over because I'm petting my dog, or else he's going to jump off.
I like it. Bring him on. Bring him on.
Yeah. He would love to, but
our podcast listeners, we have to explain, just so you know, this is also in podcast form. So we try to explain anything visual that's happening. That's
So that's true.
There's your dog just popped up here. What's his name again?
This is Chachi. Yeah.
Chachi. Got it.
But
got it. Hi, Chachi.
Yeah, so I think the level of performance was super impressive, and then I just think the attention to detail that Hendrick, goes through was insane. I mean, Le Mans is such a unique event with so many funny little rules and regulations that you just don't know unless you're there in person. And when we got there, everything was organized. Nothing missed a beat, like from tech and scrutineering to rolling through the weekend, like no issues with practice or rules or violations, strategy, pit stops. I mean, everything went so well. And for just a basic, like a NASCAR team going to Le Mans, it was unbelievable that they had such a perfect performance. And it kind of shows why they have so much success on the NASCAR side.
It's awesome, man. That thing is so mean. There's still photos popping up like when they had it on the
It
grid.
sounded so
and
good. Yeah.
It was sitting
Well, the
there,
funny
as like
sto-
looked like SUV.
the funny story at when we took it to Charlotte, we got to do like a lap before the Cup race at the Roval,
Yep.
and they're like, we showed up at like 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. to do like 3 laps to just make sure the car ran okay, and then NASCAR came up to us and they're like, all right, you can do. Now that we saw that the car's pretty fast, you can do 2 laps before. So like once the anthem ends, you do 2 laps and then pull off the track as fast as possible because the cars are rolling for green. So like, all right. And I'm like, well, can we do a burnout? And they're like, no burnouts. And I'm like, oh, okay, no problem. And I've never done like a proper burnout before, so I wasn't sure how to do it anyway. And then I'm like driving around and like the fans, like there's a ton of fans there who like just love the car. And I'm like going down the back street, I'm like, why not just do a burnout? So like I turn off TC and I come across the line and I just do a big burnout down the front straight. And with Kailman, I'm like, oh, sorry about the burnout. And then NASCAR came up afterwards. I'm like, oh, I'm really sorry about the burnout. Like I just had to do it. And they're like, yeah, and it's okay. We knew you were going to do it anyway. So it all worked out.
Rock on. Definitely for that crowd. And they love burnouts and that sort of thing.
Definitely.
So, I mean, on that weekend, you completed your NASCAR adventure this year, racing the Xfinity Series with us. But I got to say, like, you know, this goes back a couple of months where you went and did the Cup race at COTA, did late model racing this year, Xfinity race. What caused this? I know this was an interest for you. You and I had talked about it before, but how did this all come together? And do you think you were more excited or Rodney was more excited for the NASCAR adventure?
Yeah, I mean, Rodney was definitely excited. He's been waiting for this moment. But yeah, I mean, it's been a topic. Yeah, we've talked about it a bunch of times whenever you're on the IMSA weekends, just picking your brain about it. And Bill Lester was my teammate back in 2012 or 2011, and he's been pushing me to do it for a decade now. It's just hard to get opportunities like, especially coming from a sport car side with no experience. So the Garage 56 thing is really what kind of created this last push to kind of get my name in there. And when Chase unfortunately had his accident, we were actually testing at COTA in that Garage 56 car when I got the call. So it was just good timing to fill in at that event for Chase in the Hendrick car. So that kind of got the ball rolling to do that race. And then once we got through that weekend, Chris Rice from Colleague, I think, spoke to Jeff Gordon to see if I'd be available for Portland and the Roval. And then that kind of snowballed into the late model opportunity through Greg Ives, who was the Garage 56 crew chief. So it all kind of stemmed off that Garage 56 program, which is awesome to kind of get those opportunities. And I had a blast doing all of them. I think, the Cup race didn't go very well. Practice and qualifying were a lot of fun.
You were super fast
at Portland.
Yeah.
I was fast. I just got knocked around like crazy in the race and I just didn't race very well. But Portland, I loved. Like the guys racing that I was racing around you. A lot of the guys at the front there were just super respectful, and it was just a different experience than I had at COTA. So I loved that experience. The car was fun to drive. I felt competitive. And then, the Roval was a struggle. I just never felt that comfortable. And I'd say the late model was probably one of the most fun things I've ever done. Just the racecraft and racing style, the driving style on that little track was a ton of fun. So yeah, it was a good little taster this year. So I'm not sure where it's going to go, but yeah, hopefully we'll get some more races down the road.
And you mentioned the Roval being tough. You and I talked about that. I mean, that place, that's probably, I think it's the hardest place we go in an Xfinity car because there's zero room. Even the street course in Chicago is easier because for whatever reason, you kind of in it with the street course mentality, but that place for that Roval, it's so awkward and there's so many off-camber corners and different grip level changes that you don't have a good sensation of speed in a lot of areas, and you almost just have to drive it by feel. And that would be so hard for you to do having such little experience.
Yeah, it was tricky. I mean, Portland, practice was a struggle at Portland for sure. Just kind of understanding what wheel hop was. I've never felt what that was like, and you definitely know when you have wheel hop. I found that out really quick.
It's not,
and then
there's There's a little joke on that before you go further. That it's like struck down upon you by Zeus at times or something. You know,
Yeah.
like here's wheel hop,
Yeah.
but there's a reason it happens.
It is unbelievable. Yeah, for people that don't know what wheel hop is, it's like the most violent thing you've ever felt. Like if I felt that in a sports car, I'd be like, all right, the race is over, the car is broken for sure. But Portland, I loved, like the car was fun to drive. But yeah, when I went to the Roval, it was like, all right, I'm just going to pick up where I left off at Portland. And it was like I was relearning everything again. It was just difficult. I mean, practice is still only 20 minutes. The peak of the tire is only there for 3 laps. So by the time you're getting more comfortable, the grip's going down. And then you get thrown in qualifying and you have 1 lap to do it again. So it's difficult to jump in on your weekends to get up to speed. And I think even if I had an hour of practice and a couple sets of tires, it would still be difficult. The level of competition is just so high, and it's difficult to just jump in and go and be at the front. So yeah, it was a good experience. I mean, I had a lot of fun in both races, more obviously at Portland, just being towards the front. At the Roval, I was kind of in the mix and getting pushed around again, just kind of out of water a little bit. But yeah, it's a good experience. In those tough situations, you learn a lot.
I have to can empathize with you because I just think that place was so tough, and the Portlands and that Dakota is like, it drives more traditional, but for every reason that Roval is so difficult. So I can't imagine jumping in at 15 minutes, 1 lap qualifying. I mean, I was doing it with you, but I obviously been there in that car for 30 some 28 some weekends or something. So I had a little head start on you.
It's difficult.
Go ahead. Yeah,
I was just gonna say go ahead.
So a question that Landon Cassill will kill me if I don't ask, because we're all drivers on here. We love to ask sort of about your process. You mentioned driving all these different cars and jumping from GT to GTP, and some drivers talk about how they prep for a week. Maybe it's watching tape and look at data and that sort of thing. But everyone has their own process. What's your process? What's something unique maybe that you do that others don't? And what allows you to prepare to drive a race, your normal race car, if it's GTP now in the future for a race weekend, or jumping off and doing an Xfinity race?
Yeah, my favorite thing video. Like before Coda and the NASCAR race, I had the Hendrick guys had like hours and hours of footage of the previous year's races. So I spent every night just watching hours of onboard race footage. I like watching old races as well. You kind of get an idea of where guys are passing, where guys are making mistakes, different lines, listening to the commentators, like calling certain things out if something's happening with the track or track evolution. Like I've got the Rolex 24 as my next race. So I'm started watching old years races. It's a 24-hour race. If you just go on YouTube, you can watch any cars on board. So yeah, there's a lot to learn. Obviously, I've done the Rolex a bunch of times now, but getting back into a prototype, kind of watching the traffic flow, where you can pass, where you can't. Obviously, this car is different to the prototype I used to drive, so the passing zones are a little bit different where you can make moves. So yeah, for me, video's always been good. Simulations, obviously, for me, I love watching. And once the weekend starts, like I'm a big data guy as well. So going over data, kind of understanding my strengths and weaknesses and where I can improve.
Love it. The internet's striking. I think we're starting to lose you. So at this point, we'll let you go. Thank you so much, man, for coming on the Money Lap Live. Good luck at the Daytona test and obviously the Rolex 24 in the IMSA season, man. I will most likely be at the Rolex 24 with you. So I'll come by and say hi. Awesome. Best of luck. Thanks for joining us.
Yep. Thank you.
That was great. Good conversation.
It was awesome.
That was awesome,
Thanks.
Parker.
Appreciate it.
I love hearing his perspective. Obviously, thank you for asking those questions about his process. You know that I love to hear about that. His perspective on NASCAR racing, discovering wheel hop, which sounds like it is endemic to our sport and our cars. So, wheel hop definitely sucks. We should make some kind of t-shirt around that. Speaking of things that need to be made, is there a Garage 56 diecast that has been made? I don't know this.
That would be.
I don't know this.
I don't know, but I bet they would sell a ton of them.
There is not one.
If there is one, then it probably exists on spoilerdiecast.com with one of the largest inventories in the industry. If there's a Garage 56 diecast, I know that they didn't miss it at Spoiler Diecast. They have over 800 unique products currently in stock, including diecast and apparel offerings. So maybe we could get a Wheel Hop Sucks t-shirt or something like that on there as well. For NASCAR, dirt sprint cars, IndyCar, and F1, thank you, Josh, for putting yourself on camera. You look great, buddy, and showing off some diecasts that he has bought from. Oh, and there's what are you wearing a hat too? Did you get the hat from Spoiler Diecast as well?
I should have.
No?
That's
Okay.
actually on me. This is my fault.
Okay.
If I use the
They've got a pre-order system in place so you can get your hands on the latest releases without a long wait. Everything ships same or next day, super efficient in the industry. They offer free shipping on orders over $20. You can use the promo code MONEYLAP for a little treat. And I suppose their Black Friday promotion is over, but it's worth a check to see if they have any new holiday promotions or anything going on, because I know that it was 50% off on a lot of different items. Check it out. SpoilerDiecast.com today. Get your racing and diecast collectible fix.
Love that. Well, thank you to Spoiler Diecast for their support. It would be the Garage 56 would definitely be a big seller. Supposedly it's not out there yet, so they got to work on that because that thing would make some money. But we'll see. Maybe they'll share it with all of us. Maybe they'll share it with us at the Money Lap because we are promoters of this Garage 56 program. Anyway, thank you to Jordan Taylor, Rodney Sandstorm for joining us. That was cool. Just heads up, we actually have Landon Huffman coming on here. So a little bit of short track flair continuing here on the Money Lap Live. He's coming up in a little bit. Just to put a cap on our F1 discussions, basically on the Charles Leclerc stuff, we decided it's a driver thing, whatever. And I just wanted to put out there that...
Can we finish that conversation real quick? Because I know...
No, we don't have the time.
You don't want to spend any time on it? So I want to make one last note on that, and we're bringing back to this previous conversation. So this is probably horrible live TV to do. So I apologize for that. But that testing the throttle, I know I look back in the data and I noticed that it is really on the low speed corners where they're doing that, and that is a what am I trying to say? It is not a conventional thing to do, but it is super effective. And people that are really good at doing it are Martin Truex is really good at it. You said Tyler Reddick. Tony Stewart does it a little bit. AJ Allmendinger is really good at it on short tracks like Martinsville, but also at road courses at low speed corners, is just giving a little bit of a jab to the throttle, and it can kind of get the car. Yep. It's like I don't know if it kind of gets the car on a tire get a tire to bite and get some change in direction. So I don't know if that's what you see them doing it, but I did notice that it's happening in the low speed corners. And in our cars and NASCAR stuff, when you have a really tight low speed corner on a road course, or like I said, even at Martinsville, when you're in traffic, is the best time to do it at Martinsville. So when you're jammed up in traffic and you kind of miss your min speed point and you got cars in front of you, just giving a little jab to the throttle can help the car change directions.
That is, it's that was a very good explanation of what they're doing there. We'll just put a bow on the F1 world by saying maybe if we have some time later on, we can dive into some of the qualifying gaps that Kroon Chandok put out there. We had some F1 ticket data that came across in 2023 that was interesting as well. And just real quick, there's a MotoGP rumor you've seen in our ticker that Trackhouse is possibly going to be expanding into MotoGP. RNF was kicked out, which means there's an Aprilia spot open for Trackhouse. If that is to happen, we'll find out. If it does happen, maybe we can get Justin Marks here on My Lap Live.
Do we have? I think we have. We've been talking to Justin. I think he is going to be on the show next week, or we've been talking to him.
Yeah,
about coming on.
We'll see. I can't commit anyone like I did last time, so I'm just leaving it very open that 7 days from now
go ahead and
say no.
I don't care. If he doesn't come, he doesn't come. But he told us he's coming.
Exactly.
So what else can we do?
Well, speaking of guest, we have a driver who's been big in the short track world. I don't know if that works. Big in the short world. He has a huge following on YouTube. He's a streamer. He's a driver that represents the wrong vodka because it's not Big Machine vodka. None other than Landon Huffman here on the Money Lap Live. Welcome to the show, my man. We talked to Dale Earnhardt Jr. earlier, who's one of the owners of the Cars Tour. It was really a great conversation. But for you race in the Cars Tour. You'll be racing there next year. You are so involved in the short track world. Just want to continue that conversation with someone who's at the level of driving these cars, man. What does it mean to see the Cars Tour expand and for them to announce the sponsorship and all they're trying to do with the Cars Tour for you?
It's pretty awesome, actually. First of all, thank you for allowing me to come on here and see your two beautiful faces. I appreciate that. It's been I've been keeping up with you guys, so it's pretty cool to finally get a chance to do this. But yes, fresh announcement, Cars Tour, ZMAX on board as a title sponsor. I'm sure you guys have already talked to Dale about all the ins and outs of that, but we have an awesome schedule again for next year. I'll be full-time on the tour. Actually, the first time I've been full-time and running a complete schedule. This past year, I kind of joined several races into the year, and it kind of worked out where I ran the full season for Nelson, but I actually haven't ever ran a full season in the Cars Tour. So this will be my first, and a lot of cool new announcements and new stuff going on with the tour, second year for the ownership group. So I'm excited to see what happens.
Awesome.
What are you most looking forward to, on this schedule about tracks and feel thoughtful and assessing the selection of track and figuring it out, putting that all together from the business perspective, but from the racer, what kind of stands out in terms of this in the schedule?
Well, we have a good diversity. We have a very good diverse short track selection here in the Southeast. I mean, that's one of the cool parts about the Cars Tour schedule. I know a lot of people were worried that, the move in new ownership would take the Cars Tour away from its roots. And I've talked about this before several times. I do think that they're going to elevate the series. They already have, obviously, but they're going to continue to elevate the series. And I think one of their main focuses is to keep the series at a grassroots level, which means that we're not going to potentially, I guess in the future we possibly could, but they're not just going to pull us away from the Hickories and the Southern Nationals and take us to the Richmonds and the Bristols and, Martinsville, things of that nature, which although those would be very cool races to run in a late model stock car, I think that they've done a good job at keeping the series grounded at the tracks that we are used to racing at. And as far as diversity goes with those tracks, we have places like New River, All American Speedway, Florence Speedway, Southern National even now is getting to that point, and Caraway also is sort of inching into that category of being very worn out, abrasive, cheese grater type tracks where you kind of have to ride around and it's a lot of tire strategy involved. And then we go to places like Dominion Raceway, which is insanely fast, like way too much load for a late model stock car, I think, but it's a lot of fun. And our late model stock cars keep getting faster and faster, but you go to those places and it makes you wonder about, right front suspension and rolling a tire off of a wheel and things of that nature. But we have a lot of options, with fresh gripped up pavement that provide great racing, fast racing. Tri-County Speedway is one of them where it's multi-groove. You can move around, top to bottom there. North Wilkesboro is getting repaved, so we kind of have the glitz and glamour of going to a place that's big time, and we're there during All-Star Weekend, which is also, a pretty badass deal. So, a lot of differences between tracks from top to bottom in the schedule, but at the same time, we still are staying with that grassroots feel and not getting away from what makes the series so great.
That's really, I think what Dale alluded to as well is like trying to keep it in that region and not make travel costs too much. The Cars Tour stems from, I believe, is like the Hooters Pro Cup era, right? The early 2000s.
Yep.
And one of the interesting things back then was when we were all watching it on TV and that sort of stuff was it was a series that had a couple drivers who that was their main job. That was their thing. I think you are one of the rare drivers in short track world, but there's more and more of you now. There's a lot of you in dirt racing that are treating this as a career, as a place to be. You're going to be running modifieds, I believe, as well next year. But how has that been working for you at the Cars Tour level with them, what they're doing? I'm not going to ask you, hey, how much money are you making? But my point being, with YouTube and all you're doing, man, is it work? Is it a viable place for a driver like yourself to treat it, as a career destination, and to make a career and be in that position where you can do this as a full-time thing and be able to sustain it.
It's turning into that, and it's unconventional. It takes an unconventional approach. I mean, I think in the Hooters Pro Cup days, purse was a big factor. You could race for purse, and that was also during the boom of NASCAR, where every series was healthy. So you've seen that a
Mhm.
lot at the short track level, but every series was healthy. Goodies Dash Series, for instance. My dad made a living in the Goodies Dash Series for 10 years and brought Toyota into the sport at the time, but everything was booming. I mean, there was companies wanting to be involved at every level, and obviously, as you guys know, I mean, we transitioned into a period where costs have skyrocketed and things have gotten um, a little out of hand at times, but it's also difficult to put the money together in this day and age, like, versus 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. But at the short track level, obviously with the new ownership group, they're bringing a lot of eyeballs to what we're doing. So naturally, it's a little bit easier to sell sponsorship and market the series and the races as individual races now versus like a full season package even. So that's been nice. But I guess my approach and me kind of working into this situation where, yes, I am able to do this for a living, which is crazy to even think about for me because I've dreamed of trying to be a NASCAR driver. I watched my dad race for a living for his entire career and then work in the industry. I've had an opportunity to race some truck races and some ARCA races, and it just didn't work out. I was struggling in, back of the pack equipment, and I'd started spotting for a living. That was what I was doing. I was spotting trucks in Xfinity and ARCA, and then COVID happened and everything stopped. We all started streaming, started doing all this stuff online, and one thing led to another. I got back in a race car because I was practically done and started racing locally at Hickory again. Spiraled into me restoring the race shop that I'm in now, which was my dad's old shop. And, one thing after another kind of started snowballing. Won the championship at Hickory. Then I got the deal in the car store last year. So the YouTube channel's growing. I mean, it's just been one thing after another that's sort of helped turn into this perfect storm of where I'm at now. And I'm definitely not where I need to be, but I'm on that path to be able to do this full time and work in my shop and work on my race cars. The sponsor stuff is getting better and we're able to supplement my program with that sponsorship, but ultimately the content is the key. I mean, that's what's keeping people there. You can sell sponsorship. Like last year, I sold a corporate level sponsorship for basically Hickory Motor Speedway, racing weekly every week, just because of the online reach. So it's an interesting world that I'm living in right now, but I'm trying to continue to learn, and I don't have it completely figured out. I don't know if anybody does really, but learning one step at a time.
Well, you're doing
That's
what
awesome.
nobody else is doing, and that's important, and that's you're paving your own way. And I would imagine that the success of someone like Josh Berry, who has a unique story, right? He wasn't an overnight success getting into NASCAR. He had to grind it out for a long time, driving late models before he really got a break, even though he was right there. That's got to give you some hope in knowing that you probably have a longer runway than you think, that you could, maybe I don't know if your end goal is to make it back to NASCAR, but boy, I feel like with the platform you're building and the success that you're going to see when you start winning races, more races than you're already winning, those opportunities will probably present themselves.
Just as you guys are. I mean, I know that both of you have worked really hard to establish yourself in the industry. You want to be a race car driver. That's what you've, tried to do your whole life as I have. And the end goal is always to be able to make it to the highest level of NASCAR, right? Well,
Mhm.
as I've gotten older, I've realized that, okay, well, as long as I'm racing, then I'm pretty happy with that. Like it's still fun. I'm having a
Right.
lot of fun. So as long as I can have fun, support my family, and be competitive and race up front, have a shot at winning, and get to do it with the people that I enjoy, my family and friends, and my crew guys, people I've grown up with, that's a win for me. And naturally, I would love to make it to the next level. I mean, if I have an opportunity to do so, that would be awesome. I would definitely jump all over that, and it would be a blessing. But at the same time, I think I used to worry about those things all the time. And as soon as I stopped worrying about that and just started worrying about what was in front of me and capitalizing and making the most out of that and enjoying it, then everything kind of started falling into place. So I've learned
Yeah.
that the less you stress about that, I guess, in my experience, the better it ends up working out for you, and just, taking it one step at a time.
What do you think about and I don't want to, I know that you've listened to us. I don't know if you've listened to this whole show because we touched on it earlier in terms of the short track pipeline and NASCAR as this mass property pulling talent from outside the sport, but then also needing this pipeline to go, of endemic drivers and crew members, straight from our endemic form of racing, which is short track stock car racing, into NASCAR. What do you think about the Cars Tour and short track stock car racing as a pipeline for young talent, and not just, drivers and crew members, and how we foster that talent? I'd love to hear your thoughts there.
I think the Cars Tour will play a crucial role in developing drivers. I mean, it already does, but I also think that what people have to understand, and we've gotten away from that at the local level, is a series like the Cars Tour, in order for it to succeed, it can't just be quote unquote a development series. Like, it has to have people like myself, Josh Berry, Brendan Queen, guys that um, can find a home in a series or give the series some identity. Like, I think that's one thing that's hurt short track racing in the last 10 years is we've lost identity. You go to a local track. When I was growing up racing at Hickory, I raced against the Knipes and the Setzers and the Houstons and their sons, the third generation of that family. And I was a third generation, Huffman racing at the track. So all these fans were coming out and supporting because they had a family to pull for, or they've watched this development over a course of time, and they're fans of, maybe my father or their grandfather. And that's what kept the track healthy. That's what kept short track racing healthy, is the fans could relate to the people that were on the racetrack. And then when you have, a kid come in, and there's nothing wrong with that at all, but if you have a kid come in, he's only there for 1 year and then he moves on. They don't develop any relationship, from a fan driver standpoint with that kid. And then they're accelerated up the ladder so fast that it just doesn't even matter. So we have this large disconnect between, fans on Saturdays and Sundays at the high levels of NASCAR versus the short track level. And I think the Cars Tour has started to develop the identity that it needs in order for a fan to relate to a driver, follow that driver on a consistent basis. And then if that driver gets an opportunity to move up the ladder, like, a guy did in the 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, then that driver already has a large fan base or people standing behind him that can relate to them and support them on Saturdays and Sundays. So there's a disconnect, but I think the Cars Tour provides that reconnection that is needed. But I also think that the Cars Tour is a very strong tool to develop a young driver. And even me, man, I'm 27 years old and I've raced locally pretty much my whole life. I get to travel in the Cars Tour this year, and I went to like 8 new racetracks. I seen myself grow as a race car driver just in the 14 races that I ran this year. Got a lot better. I mean, I ran well at Martinsville. Just a lot of things that were new and first for me, I experienced on the Cars Tour. And I feel like I could also be, someone where if a young kid comes in like a William Sawalich or somebody of that nature, Connor Zilic, for instance, they see how I race people in the series and the example that I set, and they also return the favor and then get commended for it. So those are the people that are going to find success, moving up the ladder.
Mm-hmm. You made something real quick that stood out to me. So I've had this thought when it comes to the ladder system, and we've had lots of conversations, Parker and I, and I've had this conversation with NASCAR executives that are in charge of the ladder system. So there's a lot of really unique and creative ideas that are out there that I think the ladder system will get an overhaul here in the coming years. And one of the things that I have thought about the ladder system that kind of oversimplifies it, but is, very similar to iRacing, where it's like I thought that you should not get a Truck Series license or an Xfinity Series license or a Cup Series license without a certain safety rating. Think of it, right? Like without wrecking a certain amount. And I think even oversimplifying it to a point of you need to have a certain number of starts and actually even performance objectives, right? Like if you, in order to move up to the Xfinity Series, you have to have a minimum of 50 starts and a top 10 finish in the Truck Series. Like just plain and simple. Like I know equipment is equipment and there's people out there grinding it out there, but at the end of the day, it's like you got to have a top 10 somewhere, right? You got to go to Talladega. You got to prove that you can finish well to get to the next level. And the thing that you said that kind of stood out to me is you have drivers that are just skipping through these ranks so fast, right? Because they only have I'm going to throw out a bunch of scenarios. It's like they only have so much money to spend, right? Whether it's their parents' money or if they have legitimate sponsorship, they got enough money that they can get to NASCAR, and we got to get there now, right? Because I'm old enough, right? I'm 16 or I'm 18, so I can run a truck. So why am I messing around with these late models when I've got the money? I'm old enough, I can do it, right? Where if we had a ladder system that literally forced these drivers to spend time at these levels and built this brand recognition and their namesake and their equity at these levels, not just their driving experience, right? But their actual, enterprise value at these levels before they could move up. If that was part of the ladder, or that, that would be sort of a side effect of this requirement to have so many Cars Tour starts and so many, super late model starts and certain objectives before they could get to the next level. It would kind of keep them at that grassroots level for longer, which, could make those series healthier in terms of the brand recognition.
No, I
don't know,
agree with you completely. I have another scenario for you though. And now that you bring that up, it just reminded me of an experience I've went through. And I'd be interested to hear both of your opinions on this, especially saying that, basically what you just mentioned, which I do agree with. It would make the series healthier if people were forced to develop at a level where they're actually going to develop, not thrown to the fire where they just go out there and make, it devalues our larger series, honestly, whenever someone's just thrown to the fire and something, they just don't perform. But I'll give you this scenario. So, here I am, 2017, going into 2018. I've raced locally my whole life. I come from a racing family. I've struggled and worked really hard to try to find money. I had a marketing degree from UNC Charlotte. I've done all these things to try to line myself up so that I could, I sold some of my late model stuff, tried to put myself in a position to find some money to run some truck races. I drove for Mike Mittler at Bristol in 2017. I ran 20th, old SP2 motor, didn't tear anything up, didn't hit anything, finished on the lead lap. Then went to Martinsville, was running in the top 10 with like 15 to go in a Mike Mittler truck. And I ran in the top 15 all day, finished 17th. I got knocked out of the way towards the end, but I had two very good starts in subpar equipment at that time, and I was very proud of that. I had a pretty big sponsor compared to what I had before to give me money to go to Dover in 2018 at the start of the year. And I had Bristol and Martinsville under my belt. I understand Dover is a different animal. I get it. But it would have put me in a competitive truck for the first time ever, basically. And here I have worked all my life to have this opportunity, and NASCAR wouldn't approve me to go to Dover. And yet someone like, I'm not going to throw a name out there, but you have a number of people at that time that were running like ARCA at Talladega, and then they would go get in like a start and park truck and run like 30 laps and be 8 laps down in the 30 laps they ran. But then they get approved because they've ran 3 truck races and they've done this and this and this. But me, I couldn't get approved, and I fought it and fought it and fought it, and I couldn't get approved. Well, I ended up losing that sponsor. They sponsored somebody else for Dover, and I never got, I never had that opportunity, or that opportunity was stripped away from me. And it kind of just, I never really recovered with that path that I was on. But my point is, I think that I agree with what you're saying, but there's also a barrier whenever you have someone like myself, and even you guys have worked really hard to try to find money and have struggled at times to do that as well. But you guys were fortunate to have the experience early on to where you never really had that approval issue. Where for me, I feel like I was more than capable of going to Dover and being, productive in a truck and running, as good as a truck or whatever, learning and, not doing anything stupid, basically. And, because I'd never been to any track larger
Yeah.
than a half mile, I couldn't go. So it was
Well,
very like, it sucked.
I think
So, I mean, there's two sides
so
to the thing.
well, my point about this ladder system, though, and what I think it needs is I think that NASCAR needs to find a way to make the ladder system as clear and black and white as possible so that in that scenario, you knew before you got in the truck in Martinsville what it was going to take for you to get to Dover, to Charlotte, to Daytona, right? I
Yeah,
need to get so many
agree.
starts. I need to get, I have to get one top 15 finish before I can move to the next, it's as clear as day because right now it's totally subjective. You're absolutely right? Like they didn't, you were beholden to at the time probably Brett Bodine or whoever was in charge of the approval process, and
Yeah.
it's a very subjective process, right? And I went through a lot of the same things early in my career, right? They had I was driving for Hendrick, but I had to jump through hoops and we had to run certain races before I could move up to 1.5 tracks, and I think that for the NASCAR endemic pipeline and ladder system, I think it would benefit NASCAR to have just a very clear and challenging set of rules to get approved to the next level that keeps drivers, in those series for a certain amount of time to get their experience. For anything outside of NASCAR, because obviously we still want drivers to come from other series, a V8 Supercars driver or an F1 driver or somebody like that to pop in and be able to run NASCAR. I think that's valuable to the sport to an extent. I don't have a solution or an answer to how that would work. I do think that, that those could be subject to a review, right? But the clearest
Committee.
the clear way for a driver without experience in NASCAR to get up through the ladder system should be black and white, and it should be something that ultimately that's content, right? That's something for fans to follow. That's something for drivers to follow, for sponsors to invest in, for drivers to invest in, and teams and manufacturers to know, like, hey, when this guy gets, when this guy or gal gets to that next level, they're eligible, right? I think that's that could be a really valuable part of our ecosystem.
Can I butt in here? Real quick?
Go ahead.
First of all, there's a key strategy if you don't want to be able to get a single word in. Have 2 Landons on the money lap at the same time. And you'll never have the chance to speak. I think it's been 25 minutes since I've said a word, so I love it. It's been a great discussion. We should point out, Landon, that your idea there of sort of how do you get the international drivers or the drivers from other disciplines have been very successful in, that was a question from YouTube, from our comments there. So that some of the live viewers out there, thank you for that question. I don't think there's a clear-cut answer to both of you. I don't think we're going to solve this right here, but to give it some sort of, I guess, an abstract away from just short track racing, in the Formula Car world, and especially F1 right now, they've done an amazing job of this. And we've talked about it, Landon Cassill, on this podcast, about how it's very clear, cut and dry how you move up, how the license system works. And especially as you go to Formula One, when you look at the super license, it has areas where it doesn't quite make as much sense. Finishing top 3 in IndyCar is not nearly as high as finishing top 3 in F3, basically, because they value their FIA series over, their non-FIA series. It is a very clear, cut and dry system that rewards performance and keeping, you have reprimands that can hold you back and that sort of thing. So I think there's something out there for the short track world that leads to the NASCAR pipeline. Landon Huffman, putting all that aside, putting the Cars Tour aside, one of the biggest, I think, trends right now in all short track racing, aside from great racing, is fighting. There is endless fights right now. It seems like if there's a short track race that's on Flow, Racing America, or just streamed to your local YouTube page like Money Lap, it's going to end in a fight. What is going on in the short track world right now, my man? What is happening here?
You don't see my ass fighting.
Yeah,
I'll
well,
tell you
good.
that.
You shouldn't be. Yeah.
I mean,
Cars Tour
I
has a
think
penalty now for it, basically.
yes. I mean, they should. They're listen. Racing is, you guys know, racing is emotional. There's been times where I've sat at a race car and I would consider myself, well, I don't know. I could get heated. But in a race car, when something happens to you, you turn into a different person sometimes. Like I don't even know how to explain it really, but if especially in my own race cars, like if somebody hits my car, even if they just run into me, like sometimes I'm fine with it. Other times it's just like a switch that goes off in your head and you're like, nope, back off the ledge, like back off the ledge. Remember, and when I was younger, I struggled with that, man. Like I struggled with that so much. But I would like to think that I've matured in some ways, as I've gotten older. And I feel like right now the issue is just I'm not so sure that those fights have not always been there. Now it's just getting uh, documented and recorded and posted everywhere, and that's like the only thing that's getting shared a lot of times. So it's unfortunate you have people like that in all, maybe not all forms of racing, but NASCAR's always been very blue collar at a short track level, and I think it's unacceptable 99% of the time. I feel like if anybody should be aggravated at each other, it's a driver and a driver. My crew, you will never see my crew ever engage with another race car or another crew or anything of that nature. My dad's always brought me up that way. And I feel like most people that come from a racing family, especially racing families that have found success in the sport, uh, albeit short track level, on up the ranks, you won't see that type of reaction most of the time, if not all the time. But there's always some bad apples, and unfortunately, just those things are getting recorded right now and put out there.
Interesting. And that does make sense. It's just more publicized at this point because it just seems like every big event, and one that actually just happened this past week, and I want your opinion on just sort of the track. Southern National, you mentioned Cars Tours going there. They did something really cool, and I just wanted you to sort of give us your opinion on how you think this would work, where they paved just the top lane, and then they put like PJ1 on it or something. And did you see all this that went down?
Yeah, so they put sealer in the top lane, so it wasn't paved.
Oh,
It was just
sealer.
like
Okay, wasn't paved.
yeah, they just sealed it, which it looked paved. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
So they sealed it, and then the lane down they put PJ1, which I'll commend Mike Diaz for the effort. It was a great attempt. But historically, when we doctor racetracks, how well does that work for the racing? It usually never works out, in my opinion. So, like, I commend the effort. I think it would have been cool to see someone try to go up there, but nobody went up there. So, I mean,
Yeah.
if they were going to do it, in my opinion, they should have put cones out and made everybody run through the PJ1 in practice for like 20 minutes or something and
Yep.
just
That's the
see
way.
if it worked. Yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
if it did work, then somebody might have went up there. But also, a track like Southern National, it's one groove, but it's also the shortest way around. I mean, just looking at this video here. If you were to go up there, you're making the track like a third longer than it actually is. So I mean,
Yeah.
even if it was really gripped up there, I'm not even sure how much better it would be. So I commend them for the effort. I'm not a big fan of doctoring racetracks. I think when the racetrack evolves naturally and wears naturally, if it wears into a one group track, okay. If not, it doesn't. But as a track wears naturally, at least in the late model stock world, usually the racing takes care of itself and works out. And as you've seen in this race, I mean, it was a badass finish, and they never once touched the
Oh, yeah.
PJ1. So
I hear you. No, I just thought it was interesting. I think it's cool. I think it, is something that I feel like Texas could possibly need something like this, the mile and a half, but the distance you mentioned, it's the same problem they have there. There's 80 feet of great asphalt you'll never ever use. So my man, thank you for coming on here. This has been awesome. Best of luck in the off season and into next season, man. It's maybe we can get you back on to give us an update on how it's all going in the short track world, but keep up the good work.
yeah, had a lot of fun. Thank you guys. Appreciate it. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks, buddy.
See you, bud. Good dude. Good dude. And
Awesome.
the coolest part about that is just he is making a living right now at that level.
Mhm.
And I just think that's cool. Using YouTube, for the content side, he's got a big following. He's, obviously being successful in the race car, and then he's driving now two different race cars, which is awesome. So overall, just, doing a great job and showing what it takes right now to make it possible to make a living driving the short tracks, which is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it does. I think that grassroots racing, short track racing, is coming back. A lot of our listeners and fans probably don't even know what the ASA National Tour was, or what short track racing was back in the 90s. But that was a series, a national touring series that had professional drivers and teams in it. And you have that kind of thing is coming back right now, with the Cars Tour and with what's going on in the Southeast. And obviously, Landon is kind of a pioneer of this generation. This generation's professional short track racer.
That's awesome. I like that term. Professional short track racer. In the big track world, breaking news right now here on the Money Lap Live. RFK has been talking about how they're going to set the stage with stage 60, which has become their third car in the Cup Series. And David Reagan will be driving it at the 2024 Daytona 500. So a third car for RFK Racing, Roush, Fenway, Keselowski. Heard about this back in October when Steve Newmark and Brad were on a panel for Racing America's Motorsports panel, and they mentioned looking into a third car just simply to up their revenue as an organization and expansion. And I think when you look at the name of this, right, taking the idea of rebranding it, not just RFK, but Stage 60, very reminiscent of what Trackhouse and Justin Marks have done with Project 91. So could this be a consistent theme of these teams, branding these things differently, trying to build different brand equity, a following, maybe some different international drivers will go in this car, that sort of thing, and using it just as more content. I think it's a cool time and a really interesting time.
I think
something that Justin Marks pioneered.
I thought that I'm going to have to tease RFK a little bit. It's like they went to ChatGPT and said, give us an idea that's similar to Project 91.
Brutal.
But I'm very impressed with it, and I like it. I think it was genius. What the genius behind this that Justin Marks started with Project 91 is not just the concept of running an extra car at a handful of races when you have sponsorship to do it is not a novel idea, right? Race teams have been doing that for as long as they've been around, right? Got a couple full-time teams, full-time program, get a chance to field a car at an extra car to super speedway or a road course, no big deal, right? But the idea that Justin Marks and Trackhouse had with creating a brand around that, and giving it its own identity called Project 91, and being so public, which I think that's an edge that Trackhouse has over 2311's extra car, now Roush Fenway's extra car, which I guess I'm not reading the release exactly here, but Trackhouse has a very intentional and specific mandate behind this car that they wanted to bring in international superstars into NASCAR with Project 91. That is just a really compelling story right there. And so obviously, RFK kind of trying to capture on some of that idea by saying, hey, we're going to have this extra car, stage 60. Are they specific at all to what the purpose of it is for? I mean,
I'm literally leading this.
I love
as
David
you,
Reagan.
as
I'm
you
excited
get
about David Reagan. I love him. He's been a good friend for a long time, but certainly it's the stage 60. The purpose of stage 60 isn't to bring back, retired NASCAR veterans.
No, I think it's a similar concept, whatever it is. If you think about Ford probably wanted something in this vein. You had Toyota doing it with the 67 car at 2311. The 84 could become that for Legacy Motor Club with what Jimmy Johnson drives when they're switching to Toyota. So I think a lot of these teams are doing it. And I've seen some comments here on the YouTube comment section, I want to point out some of our viewers. Someone said, I hope it's not like the 60 car where it left off in Xfinity when it wrecked every week, I think for like 23 straight weeks. So hopefully it's doing better than that. Thanks, NASCAR fan 999. Speedway Labs said, I think it's funny how taking an extra car to the track is a big deal now. That is funny. And I think the reason why that's interesting is pretty simple. The charter system has made it novel to bring more cars to the racetrack. You are taking a financial risk usually, or it's an entirely different financial model than it is to be running a full-time car these days. And so the charter system, yes, has made it unique and made it that it has to be this sort of big deal because they're either doing it with a lot of sponsorship or they have a really big reason as to why they want to do it, which is like Project 91 and the international flair. So it is different and it is unique right now, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's cool. Like I like this. I know you're made fun of the name or whatever, but I think it's cool to have these different brands.
I like it too. I've just got to rip on it a little bit because it's.
I know
it's a little bit like the.
I should remind everyone that we have We got Adam Stern coming up at 2:30 roughly here to talk about NASCAR's possible TV deal being announced today at 5 p.m. The IndyCar TV deal and some of the other business happenings in Formula One and all throughout the motorsports world should be fun. From the Sports Business Journal, I want to talk about Australian supercars for a minute, if we could. Do you mind if we dive into that?
Can I just
let's go
and wrap one thing up for you guys real quick?
Oh,
they
producer
did
Josh.
Say, they did say that plans to expand the Team 60, Stage 60, whatever they're calling it, will be announced at a later date. They do intend to compete in additional events in 2024. So V8 supercars now.
All right. Let's see. Yeah, let's see where they end up. But I do believe their definite intentions. They talked about it already that this is something they've wanted to do. So let's hey Josh, producer Josh, he's looking through it right now. He's trying to bring it up. So this past weekend was the finale for Australian supercars, formerly V8 supercars. And we talked about the 5-second time penalty that occurred for Sergio Perez bumping into Lando Norris. Well, they had a similar situation at this race between Chaz Mostert and was it Brock Feeney? I believe it was. Sorry, I'm trying to remember now off the top of my head who it was. Yeah, Brock Feeney and Chaz Mostert. And there's a video out there. So for you listeners on the podcast, sorry, you won't be able to see this, but you'll maybe hear some of it. I want you to see this because it's basically like a bump and run. But this bump and run equals a 5-second penalty because they've been really stringent about contact in the supercars world, which is some of where Shane Van Gisbergen has been upset about and therefore obviously is leaving the supercars world. So take a look at this. Imagine a 5-second penalty for this bump into the rear of another car in NASCAR. Would the fans burn the place down, basically, is what I'm wondering. Do we have the sound, Josh?
I'm working on it. I had it working yesterday, but it's broken today.
Okay, great. We're broken.
Just make race car noises with your mouth.
Did I miss the bump? Did I miss it?
Oh no, it's that subtle. So the white car, that's Chaz Mostert. Behind him in the Red Bull car, that is Brock Feeney. He makes a pass down here in this corner. It's like turn 4 ever. Now, Chaz, there was a little contact before that they show later. Now this bump right here, that right there, and he slides out and hits the wall basically, just taps it. That was a 5-second penalty.
I'm sorry that I know that I am the co-host of a podcast that talks about all motorsports. But are you telling me that supercars
the onboard.
FAA?
Hold on. Here we go. Here's some more angles.
Down to the right-hander down at turn 7.
There it
was
is.
a touch.
That bump.
Touch him. So,
are you telling me that
supercars
supercars have FIA F1 style driver conduct policies?
Rectify that so that the umpire doesn't have to make the decision for you. So
I want to wait for the onboard here. Hold on. We got the noise. Here we go. Take a listen.
A little contact. Here's the bumper cam version. This is out of 5.
So that's the little bump.
Down the inside at 6. And
now this is the one that penalties thing.
Got him. A little touch up.
What are we doing? To your point.
What are we doing?
What are we doing? That is a rubbing is racing. That is the most perfect bump and run.
These are stock cars, man.
Yeah. I mean, supercars has always been a little bit more stringent about their contact rules because they don't quite have, they don't treat cars as disposable as we do in NASCAR. But to me, you have fenders. This is stock car racing. That is
I'm
the
glad we
kindest
live in a
bump
free
possible.
country. The European mind cannot comprehend NASCAR racing.
No. I watched this, and full disclosure, I didn't get to watch the whole races, but I watched the highlights.
What kind of? I'm sorry, I'm just
email.
walking right over you. What
Keep
kind
going.
of tyrant? What kind of tyrant has to calls a penalty on that?
It's the most just dictatorship, un-American, lack of democracy thing I've ever seen. Lack of stock car racing. I think supercars are some of the coolest, best racing in the world, but this disappointed me to know there was a 5-second penalty from this. There's just no world in which that is a penalty. None. Perez can have his penalty.
Not with fenders. Not with those cars.
Unbelievable. Just absolutely unbelievable that this is even a thing that we would do. I think the most disappointing part is they have such close racing in those cars. And they put on racing right now on the road courses that the next gen car, even though it's very similar design and car, is not nearly replicating. They do have a smaller tire, which I think is a big part of it. For whatever reason, they just don't have the same aero effects and issues that we have. But this is what those fans at Adelaide showed up for. That place sells out 280,000 people,
I asked this question, on the F1 deal, and I know we're maybe not going to get an answer right away, but depending on how thrifty Josh is. But what is the actual rule in supercars?
I got to look.
What are their driver? What are their guidelines? Like,
they have
what guidelines?
They have contact rules. Yeah, you can't knock someone out of the way and make a pass. Is essentially, if you want to just simplify the rule, you can't knock them out of the way and make a pass. There was a race earlier this year. I want to say SVG versus Brody Kostecki. They get into a little bit of altercation like that, and one of them had to give back the place down the next straightaway because he had just knocked him out. So it's simplified. You just can't have contact that enables you to have the pass, which kind of negates the bump and run a little bit. Yeah.
Bump and run.
I don't know.
Gosh, that's like one of the most darling things about stock car racing. The art of the bump and run. I mean, that was a masterful. Not only is the bump and run a great thing, and there's nothing wrong with that move, but like that was a masterful use of the bump and run. Because in where we come from, right, the magic of a well executed bump and run is that you used your car and your fenders to move your opponent out of the way, but you didn't end his race, right? You didn't wreck him, you didn't put him out, he didn't it's like you didn't just totally yard sale the guy. It's like you used him just enough to get yourself around him, and then he's still close enough to have a fair shot at you. Like that is a well executed bump and run. That's racing. That's stock car auto
perfection. Racing. It takes skill to do what Chaz Mostert did. That took skill. Yes.
He didn't waste the guy.
No. It was the most beautiful use of the front bumper into a corner where the guy in front, Brock, couldn't get the power down because he just had a little bit too much speed caused by the bump in the rear, and enabled him to make the pass and to give a
wow.
To penalize that, just unbelievable. You said it best: tyrant behavior, dictatorship, anti-racing, anti-American. It's not the way touring cars, stock car racing should be. None of those things. So. I'm
just picturing you and I submitting for credentials to a supercars race sometime next year and getting denied and being like, "What? Why is that? We can't get into this race."
That is weird.
Oh, it's probably because on a podcast on November 29th we called them tyrants.
That's actually unbelievable. You guys aren't even close to allowed to be on here. Hey, one other thing, big thing we do, obviously, is the Money Lap newsletter. And the guy who puts that all together, Kyle Dagger, here with us on the Money Lap Live, going to throw some of the biggest news topics from this today's newsletter at us and see if we want to dive into them. Kyle, welcome here to the Money Lap Live. What do we need to know out there?
Yeah, you guys let me out of my cubicle today.
Wait a second.
Gonna...
No, go back. Go back.
Well, it's only for a minute, and then you need to go back to work.
Perfect. There you go.
That's fine. Yeah, we're going to do some rapid fire questions, just hitting some of the topics from the newsletter today. So just real quick questions and real quick answers. First being McLaren acquiring, maybe stealing Monster from Mercedes. I'm curious who you think has had a bigger impact on motorsports as a whole, Red Bull or Monster Energy?
That is an interesting one.
That's Monster Energy, I think sneaky deserves a lot of credit because they have been involved in so many different forms of motorsport. Red Bull makes a big splash. I was as you were asking that question, I was thinking, my brain was thinking that you were, instead of saying Red Bull or Monster Energy, I thought you were going to say Zach Brown or Toto Wolff. And because like comparing the two, juggernauts of, it's like a sponsor moving from Mercedes to McLaren, because my thought was, what an impact Zach Brown has had on motorsports, or at least his own journey, going from essentially being a sponsor agent, right? I mean, is that where he kind of started out in motorsports and being part of the partnership side to now running McLaren. That's quite a grab for McLaren, I guess, was my point there.
I'm going to say, I appreciate that. I'm going to say in pure cubic dollars, Red Bull absolutely has to win. They've ran 2 F1 teams for over a decade. That's insane. They were in F1 even in the mid-90s as a sponsor. In all the things they've done, some of the trying to do their own series, had the NASCAR team. In cubic dollars, they've done it bigger than anyone. I think Monster, you said it best. They did it sneakily. So big win for McLaren, though. That's a huge one. Having an energy drink like that, they keep going spending. What else? What else we got?
I already touched on it a little bit, but will we see Logan Sargent on the grid next year?
Yes. Landon?
I think you're optimistic.
Expand. Why do you think
That's
so?
all I have to say there.
Okay.
I don't know. I think you're optimistic, but I'm hopeful. Well, maybe we'll see what Adam Stern has to say when he comes on here in a couple minutes.
Yep.
Okay.
That'd be fun.
What
else you got?
There's going to be some changes next year. Keep, change, or get rid of F1 sprint races.
Get rid of them.
Drop them.
They don't add anything, in my opinion. They haven't. If they were to do a reverse grid, it might. But I have never heard anyone say, I'm so glad I caught that sprint race. Grand Prix racing is about
I'll
the Grand
take a
Prix.
Reverse grid.
Stick to Grand Prix.
I'll
take a reverse
Let's
grid
inverse the
for
field.
Sure. But
I'll take a reverse
if that's
grid
what they're
in
willing to
F1.
do,
it will drive those guys, those drivers and teams will hate it. And I think I'm here for that. It'll drive them
I
crazy.
would take that. I would take the reverse grid, because if the only reason sprint races exist is for entertainment, then go all the way and make them damn entertaining. Reverse the damn grid.
Mm-hmm.
How about that? I like it.
Fair enough.
All right.
IndyCar said they might be looking to replicate like a Vegas GP or a Chicago street course. Where would you like to see the next street course at?
New York City.
Yeah.
On Manhattan.
Yeah. That would be incredible. That would be incredible. I think San Francisco would be a good one too. I think the elevation changes there. I think it would be interesting to see what kind of racetrack they could make on the streets in San Francisco.
That is, but you've got 2 great racetracks there. You got Sonoma and Laguna Seca within an hour and a half, 2 hours. So that's a problem. New York City, downtown New York,
I wasn't
in
thinking too
Manhattan.
deep
I
on
know
it.
how to do it. I know how to do it in Manhattan, by the way. FiDi. On the weekend, ghost town. The easiest thing ever.
Yeah, do it on the weekend in the summer. They'll be fine.
Yeah, perfect. What else we got, Kyle?
All right, MotoGP legend Valentino Rossi is joining the World Endurance Championships LMGT3 class next year. I'm curious, what stock car driver or open wheel driver do you think would have the best shot at joining MotoGP? Or who would just be funny?
To go try MotoGP?
Mm-hmm.
Man, it has to be whoever is by far the most physically fit. MotoGP riders are, one, insane, two, the level of strength it takes. You can't be too big either. Like there's part of that matters. But when you watch Marc Marquez get put his knee down, and now they put their shoulder and elbows into the ground, essentially, which he sort of sparred or brought on into MotoGP. Unbelievable stuff when you watch that. I don't know many race car drivers that are willing to take it that far. I think the other thing that was that would be, or like I've thought about, was I went to MotoGP back in 2008 when I was around 18, 17 years old. And I was like, man, if I didn't car race, I would do this. It's so cool. Now being 33, I'm so glad I didn't. Who you got, Landon?
I don't know. I was thinking the opposite way. I just want so bad to see Valentino Rossi in our paddock. I know he's retired from MotoGP, so that maybe it's perfect. Maybe why hasn't he been in a NASCAR race yet? He should be. Sorry,
He
I know
actually
that's not
drove
the
a
question,
car.
but
I've driven a
That's
car.
what I
with him.
thought.
60.
Yeah, so he came and drove the KBM car when I was there, and we put it together.
That's right.
Kyle Busch.
That's right.
Drove
Yeah,
around.
we
That
need
was
to get him in a
that was a
race.
Monster Energy deal. He would be awesome. I mean, the guy is, in Italy, there's three things, which is like the Pope, Ferrari, and Valentino Rossi that matter. So,
Well, my vote
he's
is
right
Michael
up there.
McDowell. Let's get him on a bike. Let's see it happen.
Sorry, you're the sacrificial lamb, Michael. Good luck. I think we're. Do we have more, Kyle?
Last question. If I wanted to win tickets to an IndyCar, F1, or NASCAR race of my choosing, just by sharing the best motorsports content with my friends, how would I go about doing that?
Funny you ask. So if you were to sign up at themoneylap.com, subscribe to the email, and then send that email to 500 of your friends who all became subscribers, you would get tickets to a NASCAR, F1, or IndyCar race of your choosing in 2024.
That's right.
That's how you do it, Kyle. I mean, that's weird. You knew to ask that question. Wow. Look at that. Synergy, I believe
It's
we call that here at the Money
almost
Lab.
like I had it planned.
Yeah. My man, thanks for the questions and such. I know we've been trying to get Adam Stern on here. He's having some technical difficulties. We should put that out there. So we're working on that as we speak right now. There is a lot going on. As we've mentioned, this is a big day in the motorsports world, with NASCAR potentially announcing their TV contract at 5 p.m. today. This is the biggest motorsports TV contract in America, and probably right there with Formula One is the biggest in the world. So he's, as the motorsports business guy at the Sports Business Journal. If I say business one more time, we might have a whole new world or understanding for business. He's very busy. So I'm in contact with him. He's had a little bit of technical difficulties. I'm trying to help him through. So if you see me looking down, I'm looking at my phone. And for our podcast listeners, this is all part of the beauty of a live show. Kyle, I'm going to ask you a
Kyle,
question. Yeah.
I was going to jump in.
Go
I'll let you keep working
you
on
do it.
Adam here. Kyle, so our question of the day, since we forgot to ask it to Landon, we asked Dale from the driver, team owner perspective. He answered it from all perspectives. Parker and I will be able to answer it from the driver's perspective, but from a newsletter writer perspective and a fan's perspective, what is the ideal racing schedule for you? How many races in a year do you think there should be, for a series, like say the Cup Series?
I'm a little biased just being a dirt fan, so just having a race quite literally every day that you can watch on streaming, I can appreciate that. But if we're specifically talking about the Cup Series, I do kind of agree with, those guys do need a little bit of a break and it gets a little oversaturated. So I think about 28, I think 25 to 28 would be the sweet spot. Selfishly as a newsletter writer, just to keep the content flowing, let's do 36 or 40 races.
Yeah. It is going to get a little bit slow here, but we found last year with the newsletter, there's plenty to write about in the off season.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we'll have no problem keeping you busy.
We definitely do.
Yeah.
There is. Kyle, thanks for joining us, man. It's been cool to have you on here.
Appreciate it.
We appreciate the questions. Those were fun ones, good ones you've put together there. As always, go check out the Money Lap newsletter at themoneylap.com. If you're listening to this, subscribe, refer your friends, help them out, help Kyle get more people paying attention to this. So as I mentioned, we are working with Adam Stern right now to try and get him on here. We'll see if that happens before we get to the end of the show, around 3:00, 3-ish sometimes here. I know he's trying to reconnect a little bit, so we will see if that works. But as I mentioned, super busy day in the motorsports business world. So he's got a lot going on, Landon.
We gotta let
him take that time. He's got to cook right now. He's cooking, as the kids would say.
Well, I mean, we're beyond a few things. I mean, because obviously the big topic of the day coming up is going to be NASCAR's TV contract. NASCAR President Steve Phelps had some remarks. Hopefully we'll get a chance to dive into those with Adam. Daytona 500 sold out 82 days in advance, which has been a trend. I think that's been a sellout show for the last several years, especially since the renovation there with Daytona Rising. So they've, that's been a huge success. And Daytona in general, I mean, if you've been to the facility, all of the real estate around the track has been redeveloped with Daytona 1. I mean, Daytona's always been a destination, not just because of spring break and the beach and Daytona 500, but it is truly a destination event now.
Yep.
For me, I really enjoy going there, staying there. So that's really cool to see the Daytona 500 sold out. New Toyota Camry came out. Any thoughts there on the look? I feel like it's a little. What's that?
Well, I thought it looked like the Toyota Avalon. I was like, wait a second, is that the Avalon? So
thinking they got the cars mixed up, or
yeah, no, I was confused. I actually got a chance to see it pretty early, which was cool. It was cool to have that opportunity. But I think the thing that really stuck out to me, and I was having some discussions with some buddies at Toyota, and they were like, yeah, the coolest part about this, and I don't think people realize, NASCAR stock cars seem like toy cars at this point, or they're not, they have no relation to the road car. The team that designed the road car worked hand in hand with the team that designs the race car. And part of that was to figure out the rules and what makes more downforce and all those things. So I thought that was fascinating. I was like, damn, that is cool. And these manufacturers talk about why they invest in the sport and why they're doing it. And part of that is just, even if it's not a relation to the road car in terms of them learning something, I think there's a element of allowing their engineers and their people within the organization to, use their brain in a different way, to think outside the box, to, sort of think about a car in a different way. And just sort of use that as an exercise, right? Like, what a cool thing. If you work at Apple and you're making iPhones, you're never going to go race your iPhone, but you make cars, you're going to go race cars. Like, that's, I think, a cool part of working at a car company. This is why motorsports exists, why we have a show, why we've had jobs as drivers. It's why it's a sport, right?
It needs to be more than just an exercise. I mean, it's part of our identity in NASCAR. NASCAR, it's in the name, stock car auto racing, right?
Yeah.
So, the more that we hear about these manufacturers using, pulling from their resources on the production side to build a race car, that just shows health and interest in the relationship between the manufacturer and NASCAR. So I'm a big fan of the Toyota brand and Toyota as a company. I've been a Chevy guy for most of my career. My closest relationships in the sport are at Chevy, but I've always been a big fan of Toyota and just them as a company. So that's really cool to see.
Definitely. And I mean, more than maybe exercise wasn't the right term, but I get what you're saying. So I think the misconception sometimes is like there is no connection, right? And I think that's wrong. That's wrong to say at this point in time.
Mhm.
There's a little bit more than people realize. So, hey, I think we're gonna move on from Adam Stern. We're getting that he's very busy at the moment. So, and he's having internet issues. So we'll let him jump. We'll just jump into the last bits of our show here, which we came up with these last week, and I think they're kind of fun, these topics. And you can use these hashtags. If you're in the chat, let us know your answers. We'll put them out here right now. But actually, before we go into that, real quick, you mentioned the Daytona 500 being sold out 82 days ahead of time. I saw some stats. I think that's like massively early, like insanely early, compared to in recent years, which is huge. 82 days ahead of time. I guess in the last 5-6 years, the most has been 6 days. So this is a huge win for NASCAR.
Wow.
And you mentioned Steve Phelps' conversation. So that's what we were going to dive into with Adam Stern. So one of the things he mentioned is a prerogative for NASCAR going forward is more sellouts. Teams need to be, or tracks need to be more on notice about more sellouts. The tracks that had 2 races that they went down to 1, guess what? They were able to sell out. Tracks are being put under more pressure to promote, to find a way to get more people there and to sell out races. I think they had 5 more sellouts than last year, this past season, and they want to keep raising that bar. And I have to agree, there's no better feeling than being in the atmosphere of a sold out racetrack, sold out event, packed to the gills, people everywhere. There feels like there's more and more of those in NASCAR as of late, and especially when I look at like the fall Martinsville and obviously the championship race. But I think that's a great sign and something big for the sport to focus on.
I think one thing that's really worth noting here, and this would be a good conversation. We need to put this in our notes to remember it for when Justin Marks is on the show next week. If Adam joins us either today or maybe we'll get him again next week. Some of that can go deeper into the economics here. The tracks historically have gotten a large piece of the TV money, to the point that it's possible that when you pair in their previous deals, the previous deals that the tracks did with NASCAR, when you pair their large portion of revenue coming from TV and the long-term contracts that the tracks were getting from NASCAR, right? Multi-year deals to be on the schedule, or, damn near permanent deals, I guess, to be on the schedule. It almost seemed like the tracks were not incentivized, or the ROI was not there for them to try to put butts in the seats.
Yep.
And that sounds backwards and it sounds wrong, but it seems like that's what was happening. And you had venues like Texas Motor Speedway, right? Sorry to call one out, but you have a venue like Texas Motor Speedway who's taking up multiple dates on the schedule in one of the largest markets in the US, and couldn't fill their stands, right? Something's wrong there. And when I am pretty certain that in the future NASCAR, in the NASCAR that we're living in now, the NASCAR that's happening now, and these new TV deals, these new track deals, NASCAR is putting a huge emphasis, and I don't want to say burden, but they're making it a point to these racetracks to say, hey, if you want these dates, you have to put fans in the seats. your responsibility. We bring the show, right? We put the race on TV. We put together these deals. And yeah, there's going to be some benefit in revenue with the tracks that, that get compensated for that or whatever. But the racetrack, it is your job to activate these races in your local markets. It is your job to promote. We're traveling 38 weeks a year, right? We're going from race to race and promoting the national market and the TV market. But when we come into your local market, you better have it together, because we can't put a product on TV with empty stands.
And Chicago put the whole sport on notice. Chicago, the second highest rated race of the year, right? The massive success in terms of attendance on Saturday before they had the weather issues. I think that race showed the power and the possibility for NASCAR in the coming years, right? And shout out to everyone involved and Ben Kenny and everyone who made it happen. I still think it's probably one of the most important events in the history of NASCAR. And it showed everyone, and it showed, hey, look, do something unique, promote it correctly, and have a great show, and all these things can happen for you, right? And then I think I look at tracks, but like Martinsville. Martinsville is a track that has been around longer than any of them, and yet it finds a way on a fall race, height of football season. Everyone says it's impossible. Sellout, basically. Come on. So something's good there, right? And the racing hasn't been perfect with the next gen car, and it still had a huge crowd. So I think those
in the middle
are
of nowhere.
Middle of nowhere. Yeah, it's true. It's 45 minutes from the nearest nice hotel, and there you are selling out 60,000 seats, wherever it is. I think those show the power. I saw one commenter here, Travis Loweness, said, "Do you think Iowa Speedway will sell out?" Yes,
I hope
100%.
It should. It absolutely should. It should. It's a niche market that I think has deep racing roots. It's not far from Knoxville Raceway. They will need to promote to a dirt racing audience to come out and watch their dirt racing stars race, because Iowa has a lot more dirt tracks than it does asphalt tracks. It does have one asphalt track aside from Iowa Speedway, which is the Hawkeye Downs Speedway, which I'm very proud of, as I not only grew up there, but now is owned by the Cassill family. So that's a wonderful thing. But I think that Iowa Speedway should be a sellout, and I think it'll be an extremely entertaining race. Hopefully I get to race in it in at least one of the series.
Damn
Sorry
right.
to make it about myself there.
No, I liked it. I was going to say, you're like the unofficial ambassador right now. So,
yep.
I want to move in to something else. I want to move forward. We got 10 minutes left in this here at Money Lap Live, and we came up with these last week. These were some of our big topics. I want to bring in all the boys. So producer Josh, Kyle can reconnect here and start to go through some of these, because they're important questions to ask on a week of post Formula One as we head into off-season motorsports. These are the burning questions people have each and every week in the motorsports sphere. And we start off with Landon, the hashtag wreck of the week. The boys are on here now. Everyone who makes the Money Lap happen. We all throw around. Give us your wreck of the week. This is a tough one. Not a ton of racing this past weekend. Do you have one, Landon? We'll start with you.
I feel like I saw a highlight wreck from the Cars Tour race, but I don't know. I don't have a wreck of the week other than that. Is there something I'm missing?
Our segment already.
Did I ruin our segment? Why'd you start with me?
Josh, do you have one?
Yeah, my producing job today, it's been an absolute wreck. I've messed up everything.
Terrible.
Adam Stern didn't even connect. That right there, missing out on Adam Stern, that is my wreck of the week.
I know, but I'm not going to blame you. Kyle, what do you got? I know I'm putting you in the spot. You didn't even know you were jumping in for this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just have to piggyback off of Landon. I mean, the big wreck from the Cars Tour race that caused the fight and a lot of controversy from the late model world yet again.
Love that. Perfect. My wreck of the week happened yesterday, and no one really saw it. and there wasn't a lot of information around it. But I have to think it's the final injustice for this car and the season that this team has had, considering where they were just a little bit ago. That is George Russell in the Mercedes F1 car crashing at the Abu Dhabi test post the race weekend, getting the P2 in the Constructors' Championship with a car that they have not liked, not enjoyed. He got it. He put it in the wall. Apparently some sort of front-end failure. No matter what the cause was, I would say most of the team said goodbye and good riddance. So, wreck of the week for George Russell, Mercedes F1 team. Next big one, guys. And this one is my favorite. I think this is a cool topic. This is one the motorsports world should be talking about all the time. Each and every week, we should be taking one driver, one person, and saying who is the wheel of the week, meaning who did the best job. Hashtag wheel of the week. Thank you very much. Landon, I'm not going to start with you this time. I'm going.
Well, let me
Josh.
get mine out of the way.
Oh, really? Now you want one?
Why can't it be Max Verstappen? I mean, we just finally wrapped a bow around the dream season. I mean, all the records set. How many wins? 19 wins in 1 year? Is that what it was?
That's a lot. That's a lot.
Mhm.
It's a big amount.
So, yeah, Wheel of the Week is capping off the dream season with a win in Abu Dhabi.
All right, Josh, you can go next.
Since Landon decided to take the easy one and made me have to make a decision off those lines on really good seasons, I'm going to go Daniel Ricciardo. Got picked out in the middle of the season, came out, immediately started performing again, did not look like he was the lost self he was when he was at McLaren, figured out what he needed to do, and has basically put Sergio Perez on notice just at the snap of a finger, and also is still his hilarious self. I gotta hand it to Danny Rick for having a great season and just coming back and performing and making it happen.
All right, Kyle, you got one?
Yeah, I gotta go Pato Award. I think in that same Abu Dhabi test, pretty sure he went P2 and could possibly maybe see a future in F1.
That's a good one. Damn, I really liked that one. I kind of wanted that.
That's a good one.
I was gonna go pat up because I did see that he's now the reserve driver for McLaren. Sees a path to Formula One. I think that is so cool. He's someone I really wanted on the Money Lap Live. Maybe we can make it happen here in the next couple of weeks. But he is a driver I saw a couple years ago for the first time, and I was like, this guy is a Juan Pablo Montoya 2.0. And he has proven that time and time again with his quick hands, his just insane street course qualifying ability, which is so reminiscent of JPM in his IndyCar era. Amazing speed at the Indianapolis 500, and now jumping in F1 machinery and being up to snuff. He did say about that, Kyle, that was really cool. And Landon, you'll appreciate this. He basically said that was the first time he really got to wring the neck of an F1 car, because every other time he's done it, he's been in a position where you can't wreck or that sort of thing. And he said that, that was the first time he got to like lock the rears and find out what the car does and really push it. And he said, these things are on another planet. So he's definitely the wheel of the week.
Cool.
For getting that chance, doing that. Final big topic, boys. And this one's important because it happens almost every motorsport event in the world, every time there's a race. And that is the did not finish DNF of the week here on the Money Lap Live. This can be anything. Anything you feel like they just didn't get it done or sorry about. I'll start with you, Kyle, this time. I've given you no prep. You had no idea this was even coming. So let's see. Let's see what you got. Give us something good.
Man, I feel like this right here is the DNF of the week because I have nothing right now.
What a cop-out. This guy.
How about a DNF of the week to whoever it was that had their electric, their ignition box ripped out of their car in the short track fights.
Which is the funniest thing to me. That's
God, it's horrible. It's horrible.
To have it just ripped out from you. I think that's a funny.
Possible.
Well, no, I think that's a hilarious way to like make your point. known. If like they're trying to get back on track, you just rip out the ignition box, all the wires. They're not going anywhere. And there's nothing harder to fix in a race car than electrical. So the second they've done that, they are definitely DNF'd. And I just think that is such a sly way. It completely beats fighting. So, Josh, what's your DNF of the week?
Yeah.
My DNF of the week is going to be hopefully not a DNF of the week, as I'm going Lemons Racing this weekend over at Sonoma. We're going to do the 24 hours of lemon at the Freeze Your Arse Off 24 hours race. For those who aren't familiar, Lemons Racing is you get the worst junk car you can find and turn that into your race car. And it is probably the lowest barrier to entry for any type of motorsports racing. There truly is the most bang for your buck. And hopefully we don't DNF, but if we do, that'll also be my DNF of the week for next week, I think.
What's the team name? Josh, let's give
goodness, it's
love.
Y2K Racing, and our theme is basically, are you Y2K prepared? Make sure to shut your race car off before December 31st, 1999.
Thank you for reminding me that I'm pretty sure that you weren't born in the 90s.
I'm a 98. Dude, give me that much. I may not remember anything, but I'm a 98.
Might as well be 2000.
My outfit will be a pinky. I will be what I was in the 90s, just a child.
I'm pretty certain that Kyle was not born in the 90s.
97.
That could be
just
all right.
There you go.
Wow.
We really need a Gen Z on here. We need AJ to get it on. Well, you guys are probably Gen Z, actually. You are Gen Z.
I think we are. We're on the cusp.
We are well represented.
I think we're millennials.
Yeah.
I like
no, we're the millennials.
Parker, I know you have
You're
a well-thought DNF of the week. Let's hear it.
So mine was absolutely going to be fighting short track racing, and the trend that it keeps showing up. Although I do practice boxing weekly and sometimes daily, I don't like to see it. I don't like to see fighting. I don't think it has a place in the racetrack. I understand passion and wanting to make a point and that sort of stuff, but I love the idea of pulling the ignition box. I don't like the idea of 42 people from off the street and the hot dog stand and the local creamery and the mechanic down the street jumping into a fight just because it's fun and they get on TV. So
I know
my other DNF
joke of this segment. I know we all made a total
DNF.
joke of this segment, but I'm surprised
Okay,
that nobody, in all seriousness, said SVG.
Well, yeah, because he crashed literally so early on and lost his championship hopes. It was a long shot anyway. But
that's got to be the heartbreak DNF of the week. The real, actual, serious heartbreak DNF of the week.
He says
that's his send off.
He says goodbye to supercars and comes over here on his American NASCAR adventure. I did just get a text from Adam Stern. His internet is now back, but that's perfect timing, guys. So the DNF of the week, us having Adam Stern on the Money Lap Live. We'll try again for next week. Guys, I do want to give a huge apology, though, to Kyle Busch because we've run out of time. He was going to come on here, but not going to happen. So hopefully we can find some time for him next week as well. That's it for the Money Lap Live. Thank you all for watching, for listening. We're going to keep doing this all the way to December 13th. Stay here and check out themoneylap.com. Thanks for watching.